I hope I never forget my Maha Mantra. What would happen if you forgot your mantra? You're sitting there and you're supposed to be chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Right? Everything else has failed. Hey, your body's given up, no more running around. Can't talk it properly, you're spluttering, just an awful mess, right? What if you forget your mantra, my friends? You sit there, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare, and Coca-Cola, Hare Cola, Hare. What happens? Do you think Bhagavan sees the good intention? Right. Off we go. Pull this up. And good evening. Om Ajnana Timinandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshorun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminite Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Akanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya. Apavitra Pavitru Va Sarvavastha Gatopi Va Ya Smaret Pundarikaksham Sa Bhayabhyantara Shuchi. So here we are again, my friends. I think this is our last session. And we're good, and so therefore we will do the last chapter of the Vedanta Sutra, the very last, the 4.4. 4 padas. Each pada has 4 adhyayas, sections. So let's just do the 4th one. What's the grand finale? You're not going to get a lot of information from the Vedanta Sutra. Why not? Because the Vedanta Sutra is all about the Upanishads, and the Upanishads are super cool in so many places, but you don't get the rich descriptions of liberation that you're going to find in the Bhagavata Purana and in the later traditions. But you've heard me say that lots of times, so I shall shut up and we shall proceed. And we'll get rid of this.
Again, me. I had to remind you about,
I know about Ishvara.
Overseen by Bhagavan, right?
Yeah, we're going to actually run into it here. So,
Okay.
but thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Eleonora. All right, so where are we? Chapter 4, section 4. This is it. And this is about, Vedantins are constrained. They have to stick to what the Upani, you could see, poor old Ramanuja, he wants to tell us about the kingdom of Vishnu, the spiritual realm made of Satchidananda, where it's just condensed Brahman, no Prakriti, no, not the material gunas, no Sattva-Rajas-Tamas, pure consciousness, wonderful infinite realms with an infinite number of beautiful, liberated bhaktas are interacting with their beloved Lord in all infinite numbers of ways. Krishna gave us a little peek at that, Krishna's a baby, or Krishna's a friend, or Krishna's a lover, just a tiny peek of, let's say 4 or 5 different kinds of modalities, but they're infinite. But he can't share that with us when he's writing the Vedanta Sutras, because he's got to do the Dharma. What's the Dharma? He's got to he can't just start. He's actually a very responsible scholar. He's not injecting anything. And so therefore he can just he's you have to be, if you want to be taken seriously as a theologian, if you want your tradition to be taken seriously, you have to write a commentary of the Vedanta Sutra. So he was the first Vaishnava that really wrote, an amazing scholar, that he wrote a commentary establishing, the distinction between God and the eternal distinction between God and the soul and the world. But he's constrained. So let's see what he does. Let's see. Okay, we got 2 hours and we got to finish this. We're going to jump around. Right. After attaining Brahman, the individual, and maybe I can get rid of this. Give me more space up there. The individual self becomes manifest in its own true nature. Does this ringing a bell, anybody? What happens when you chitta vritti nirodha? Tata kim bhavati. What happens then? Drashtuhu, of the seer what? Sva rupa. In its sva, its own rupa, nature. Svarupa vasthanam, it's situated. Otherwise, where are we situated? In the body mind. That's not our nature. Why is it not our nature? Because when you die, your body rots. That seems a pretty good reason. So that can't be might be your temporary nature for 100 years. But how different is that from wearing a coat for an afternoon and then taking it off when you get home? Clearly, that's not your real nature. So what is your real nature? So we see the same word here, sva, except it's in the instrumental case, sphena. You read a little, sphena. So it's the same word, because obviously it's the same word. We're all these traditions are basically presenting the same truth, but they're taking up different aspects of it. And yoga is the experimental. Okay, you've read the Upanishads, you've heard about this Atman. Okay, here's how you attain it. Chitta vritti nirodha, and then you get the Yoga Sutras. But the Vedantas just focused on the Upanishads and the teachings of the Upanishads about this Svarupa of the Atman. So now the sutras begin to take up for consideration the kind of glorious existence the released selves enjoy. The text says, which text? Chandogya 8:12:3. Is everybody getting it? Every single everything in the Vedanta Sutra is a reference to something in the Upanishad. Got it? Nothing else. If you want to put something else in, you got to find a quote from the Upanishads. No bringing in Vishnu's forearms. Why not? Because it doesn't say that in the Upanishads. You want to talk about Vishnu's forearms, you've got to write Ramanuja wrote his own stuff. And that's where all of his bhakti they can do. Then he's not constrained. He can just say, look, the Upanishads are just seed. They're like the seeds, and the seed grows. So I'm going to give you the fully developed tree. That's what everyone says. But now I'm highly impressed by his intellectual rigor that he's sticking to the Vedanta Sutra. Okay, it's just like, if you're reading the Krishna stories, no point saying, well, where's Rama? Well, Rama's in some other text. He's not in the Krishna text. Or if you're, studying Ayurveda, it's no point saying, well, where's astrology then? Well, astrology is another text. So therefore, when you're doing the Vedanta Sutras, no point saying, what about this or that? All you're going to get is what's in the Upanishads, my friends. I'm going to bang away at that until you all scream, stop. We get it. Right. So here it is. Now, the text says, now the serene one, and this is the cool thing about the Upanishads. The sutras they're not poetic. They can't be. They've got to be completely clinically precise and no verbiage, no poetic description. No. A sutra is minimalism, complete opposite of poetry. But the Upanishads are much more poetic, actually. They're quite beautiful. Now, the serene one, the Atman, rising up out of this body, attains the supreme light, right? Paramajyoti is the Sanskrit, and appears in his own true form, Svarupa, my friends. Okay, here we got the Chandogya, the actual thing. Okay, and this is the text that's going to be, this is very, very interesting text. We start here on the right-hand side. This is a different translation, so it's going to be slightly different. I mean, it's the same Sanskrit, but obviously translators are not going to use precisely the same words. In the very same way, this deeply serene one, we're actually in the Chandogya itself, right? Look at the top here. We're in the Upanishads. We're reading the Chandogya, which is going to be the source text for the next couple of sutras. This deeply serene one, after he arises from this body and reaches the highest light, right, which is Brahman, right? In many mystical traditions, that ultimate truth is the nearest thing we might have it in our realm is light, because light, number one, is all-pervading. Number two, it's kind of intangible. You can't really grasp it, not with your hands. You can see it with your eyes, fine. But it's, somewhat intangible compared to other material things. And it is luminous. It illuminates itself and everything else. So consciousness is conscious of itself and everything else. So it's the best metaphor analogy you're going to be able to find in the realm of Prakriti is the light. And that's why it's become so cliche, so I wouldn't say overused, but massively used in mystical experience. So there it is, the deeply serene one, after he rises up from this body, reaches the highest light, emerges in his own true appearance. Now look at this. He is the highest person. He roams about there, laughing, playing, enjoying himself with women, carriages, or relatives without remembering the appendage that is his body. This seems to point to a type of liberation very different from the sort of monistic one of just consciousness, conscious of itself. But there's action and personality and a kind of this world is a reflection of that. Very interesting passage. It's only one, but here it begins. The Vedanta Sutra, obviously, this captured the Vedantins. What does all this mean? That after he's risen up from the body and he's reached the highest light, right? Not that he's not in some celestial realm, he's not in some interim place, he's fully liberated. So what does it mean that he roams about there, laughing, playing, enjoying himself with women, or men, obviously? I mean, it's written by, with others, let's say, carriages, relatives, without remembering the appendage that is his body, just like you don't remember your part. So that's the passage. Very strange almost. Right. Now he starts off only in the first bit. Not that whole thing about women and carriages. Does the individual self, who rising up out of the body, attaining the supreme light, have any association with the new body? This is the topic of the first sutra, which has to be produced like that of a deity. So if you become a celestial, you have, the body has to be produced from your karma, just like if you become a dog, it has to. So, right. So when you become liberated, do you get another body like a celestial does, which has to be produced? Or, this is the question of the sutra that the sutra is going to discuss. And remember, we're going to have the Purva Paksha, and then we're going to have the position of Vedanta. We're going to have the opposing point of view. But first of all, what's the question? What are they going to be debating? What are they going to be? What are the opposing opinions going to be based on? Here's the question. Does the individual self, sorry, got distracted there. Does he have, right? Does he have any association with a new body, which has to be produced like that of a deity, the celestial? That's going to be the Mimamsa, the ritualists. Remember, one of the 6 schools are the ritualists, and they're not interested in liberation. They want to attain the celestial realm, and they perform rituals, and they don't like this idea of kind of eternal liberation of the Atman absorbed in its own nature. What to speak of, the Bhakta liberation of eternal association with Ishvara. No, they just want the Vedic ritual that perpetuates the universe, and then you die, get good karma, go to the celestial realm, get a celestial body. Okay, and that's their version, not that equivalent of liberation. Of course, the critique of the Gita, right, in chapter 2, and the Upanishad says, yes, fine, you can do all of that, but you can't stay there, because it's a karma body. If you do Vedic rituals, you get good karma. So therefore you get a karma body. But your karma body is temporal. You did 100 rituals, so you get 100 units of karma in your celestial body. When they run out, then what? Then we come back down then. That's going to be the critique of the Gita right there in the very beginning. Because the Vedic ritualism is still, people don't pay attention to this in the Gita. Around verses 40, chapter 2. Right. Or is it that he manifests himself in his own natural form? This is the doubt. Does he get a body like a celestial, or does he just in his own form? The passage must be understood in the former sense the opponent holds. The Purva-paksha says, no, you get a body. For otherwise, the scripture referring to final release would teach an undesirable goal of human endeavor, as one's own nature is not the desirable goal of human endeavor. The opponent says, if you think, if the goal of yoga is just to attain to your own nature, well, that's pretty useless. You are your own nature. Well, you haven't gained anything then. That's what you are. So what have you gained then? So what's the point of all that yogic activity to gain something that you already have? The opponent is saying, well, you're sitting there chanting Om in the forest, for what? You're of new Svarupa. Well, you've Svarupa all along, haven't you? It's been your Sva all along. What have you gained then? So, as the opponent, Mimamsa. Now, look, he says, when the pure self abides by himself during deep sleep, right? In deep sleep, consciousness is not externalized. It's not flowing out through the senses. It's not even the chitta is in nirodha. Actually, the deep sleep is a state of chitta vritti nirodha. So the opponent says, well, you get that every night. Your Svarupa, you're abiding in your own self. So in what way is the goal of human endeavor attained? So you can do every night you go to deep sleep, you're in your Svarupa. So what have you gained then from what's this liberation then? Says the opponent. And then he continues, the release is not mere cessation of pain. By the way, Sankhya would say, doesn't talk about bliss. Vedanta, this whole Satchid Ananda, this Ananda part of the Satchid is Vedanta. And why does Vedanta say that? Because the Upanishads say that. But Sankhya doesn't say that because they're not so interested in scripture. They say liberation is Sat and Chit, no Ananda. It's just freedom from suffering, which is desirable, like deep sleep. So the release is not mere cessation of pain, says, remember, this is all Purva-paksha, opposing point of view. For the scripture clearly declares that the released self experience infinite bliss. The opponent says, the Taittiriya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, right? Here we have the Taittiriya, my friends. I got this ready. Look, analysis of bliss. Take it, right? Taittiriya 8. Now, take a young man, a good young boy who is learned very quick, solidly built, extremely strong. Take a man or a woman. You have to excuse this, obviously it's male-centric universe as the whole world was until 100 years ago. So extremely strong. Assume he owns this whole world, right? So the Upanishads say, imagine the best possible karma. You own the whole world filled with earth, and you have great health, and you're strong, and you're handsome. That would be a single measure of human bliss. That bliss you get from have best possible karma, 1 unit. And then it goes up to the universe. The next realm, the Gandharvas, 100 human blisses is one of those. And the next realm, 100 of those is one of those. And it goes up. Actually, somebody calculated this. Let me get you the figures. I'm sorry that I can't remember the name of the good soul who sent this in, but there's two calculations like this. There's the Brihadaranyaka, where the highest human bliss is what's the figures? I'm trying to read this now. 100, 10 to the power of 20 greater than our bliss, according to the Brihad. So if you keep going up, each realm is, so you have to be 100 units of human bliss for one realm, for one bliss of the Gandharvas, 100 of the Gandharva blisses for the bliss of the next realm. So if you do the math, if you follow the Brihad, you get 10 to the power of 20 is the bliss of the Atman compared to the best possible human bliss, meaning owning all the wealth in the world, the Taittiriya has a slightly lesser figure of 10 to the power of 12, but that's a whole lot of zeros. Okay, so therefore, the opponent says, we can't just say that liberation is absence of pain, because where is our Ramanuja? We can't say that. The release is not mere cessation of pain at the bottom down here, for the scripture clearly declares that the released self experience infinite bliss, meaning either 10 to the power of 20. Obviously, that's it's just being rhetorical, because we don't understand infinite. So they try to come up with some number that the human mind can grapple with. Okay, that's why there's a difference. 10 to the power of 20, 10 to the power of 12. They're not actually being mathematical. They're just trying to sort of give some way for our, otherwise infinite is just a word. We have no idea what it means. So, okay, so the opponent says, throw some wood in. You got to have some bliss in there, because the Upanishads say it's bliss. Okay. So, and he quotes a verse, like the one we just quoted, because you have to quote a verse if you're going to make any statement. Now, so we cannot say, now we're over here, third line, page 479, that the true nature of the individual self is consciousness of the nature of unlimited. Now, the opponent wants to say, remember, keep your eye on the ball. The opponent wants to say that liberation is really, becoming a celestial and getting a new body. And it's through the body that you get this bliss that the Upanishads speak about. That's what he wants to say. The bliss is not in the Atman, he's going to say. But the opponent recognizes, well, we have to respect that the scriptures that talk about bliss, but you need to get, even in liberation, you get this celestial body. That's how you get your bliss. Now, this is a bit convoluted, my friends. And I looked it up in the fuller version. I'm going to give you, because we're going to run out of time. He's going to say, look, this is a good argument. We cannot say that the true nature of the individual self is consciousness of the nature of unlimited bliss. If you want to say that your Svarupa is Sat Chit Ananda, so Sat, okay, he's not interested in that. Everybody accepts that. You don't have to debate that. It's eternal, fine. And it's Chit, everybody, not everybody, but well, no, Nyaya doesn't, but let's not worry about that. But certainly Vedanta and most people accept that it's consciousness. Now, if you're going to say it's also blissful, eternally, that's its very nature. Remember, if the Atman is eternal, its qualities are eternal. Let's be clear. If something is eternal, its qualities are eternal. Let's say that the sun is eternal, but that means light and heat are eternal. The sun isn't. But let's for an analogy, suppose that the sun were eternal. If the sun is eternal, its qualities are eternal. That would mean its qualities are Sat and Chit are eternal. They could never be concealed. You might cover it from our perspective, you might cover it by a cloud, but it's always, the sun itself is always going to be luminous and hot. Is that clear? You can't cover the essential nature of something, because then you destroy that thing. If you take away the light and the heat from the sun, you've destroyed the sun. The sun doesn't exist at that point. Right, so keep that in mind. Here's the argument coming up. We cannot say that the true nature of the individual self is consciousness of the nature of unlimited bliss, which is concealed by nescience in the state of samsara and becomes manifest when the self attains the supreme light. He's saying, you can't say that, okay, we're covered now in samsara by the kleshas, by avidya. They like to say, the Vedantins like to use the language of avidya, as does Patanjali. And we're covered by Maya, covered by avidya, but our real nature is Sat Chit Ananda. It's just concealed. You can't say that, he says. Why? Because concealment of knowledge, which is of the nature of light, is nothing but its destruction. If you remove bliss or knowledge or consciousness, by the way, when he says knowledge here, he means consciousness, Chit. It's the translator that used that term, because jnana can be used for Chit. This is another complicated thing about Indian philosophy. Jnana can mean consciousness in one context. Elsewhere, it can just mean knowledge of something. It all gets a bit, with different schools, it can all get you have to sort of really pay attention to who is using a term in what way. So that's the argument. You can't say that bliss is inherent in the Atman, because then it would always be there. It would always be blissful, just like we're always conscious. Whether you're a tree, you're conscious. If you're an animal, you're conscious. It might be covered, but consciousness itself is always going to be conscious. And so Sat and Chit are always there. And if you're going to say that the nature of the Atman is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, then there'd always be Ananda. You would never not be Ananda, just as we're never not Sat, when we're never not Chit. So if our Ananda really was inherent in the Sva Rupa, says the opponent, it would always be there, maybe a little bit covered up, but you couldn't extinguish it, because that would be the destruction of the Atman itself. If you extinguish its qualities, you have destroyed that thing. If you take luminosity away from the sun, you've destroyed the sun. The sun, by definition, is a substance which is itself luminous and emits luminosity. If you take that away, then there is no sun anymore. That's the argument. We're going to jump down. So what's his conclusion? End of the paragraph. Thus, we have to conclude that the individual self, on approaching the supreme light, so the opponent is not questioning that is, liberation. It's not questioning this part. Right, because he's quoting that verse from the Chandogya. So thus, we have to conclude that verse in the Chandogya that we began the commentary with, we have to conclude that the individual self, on approaching the Paramajyoti, supreme light, connects himself with a new form that has to be produced. That's the opponent. That liberation means you attain a celestial form which you don't presently have, but you attain it. It's produced, right? And then the second argument he gives, therefore the term appears will have its primary meaning. In other words, the form appears. He appears in his form. So he wants appears to mean that he receives this new body. And for him, that's the literal way of translating the word appears. Another big part of Vedanta debate and exegesis is, do you take things in primary meaning or secondary meaning? Primary meaning means literal meaning. Secondary meaning means some, metaphoric way of reading it, or non-literal, or secondary way, not literal. So a primary meaning is always going to carry the day. It's going to be more, obviously, to read the text and just, accept what it says. That's going to be a more powerful reading, or a more authoritative reading, than saying, well, it doesn't really mean this. It means, it's an allegory or a metaphor. Clearly, then at that point, you're not accepting revelation directly. You're imposing your own human interpretation. So therefore, the opponent says he likes his position, because he thinks that the primary meaning of the word in one's own form and appears can be accepted. Now, so that's all the Purva Paksha. The sutra rejects this view. Now we get anybody remember the term? What's the response to the Purva Paksha called in Sanskrit? 5 brownie points. Katie, come on. Rhonda, come on, Rhonda. Eleonora. Shanti. Sylvia. Kate. Come on.
I missed the question. Go again.
Happy Jack. Come on, Happy Jack's going to tell us. Come on, Happy Jack. The response to the Purva Paksha. All right, one more person, Marcia. Marcia is going to save the day. She's going to come writing in when she's going to save the day. What is the response? Bay. Right. Siddhanta. The Siddhanta, write this down. The Purva Paksha is the opposing point of view. Especially in Vedanta, not so much Patanjali. He lets the Vedanta do all of this. And that's why okay, utter yoga anushasanam, utter, now you've studied Vedanta. The Vedantins do all this kind of debate. Every single, more or less, sutra of the 500 sutras of Vedanta Sutra, there's the sutra, and then immediately there's the question, and the opponent says this. It doesn't say the opponent. It says, if it be said, or if one says. That's how you recognize the Purva Paksha. And then the whole Purva Paksha makes it very intellectually alive, my friends. It's not dogmatic. They're always engaging the opposing points of view. So for yoga for us would be, if you say, the Purva-paksha for us would be, if you say consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the neurons, in a modern day yogi, we have to debate, we have to respond to our intellectual environment. So what would be the Purva-paksha for us as yogis? The materialists, what do the materialists say? That consciousness is not some separate thing like an Atman or a Purusha. It is nothing other than, some atomic, some sort of neurological combination or some atoms that come together in a particular way, and there is emergent and consciousness emerges. That's our Purva-paksha. So if we were writing a commentary, we would say, if it be said that consciousness emerges from matter, we say, right, and then you give the whole argument, you give the opponent's argument, because we cannot see this Atman, we have no evidence of any Atman, but we can see atoms and neurons, and therefore we have no grounds to accept some mysterious invisible entity, some ghost in the machine. So you give the whole Purva-paksha argument, and then you say, if it be said like that, and then you give your Siddhanta. We say no. We say no. Why do you say no? And then you give your response. So that's how Vedanta exegesis works, my friends. Okay, so therefore the sutra rejects this view and says that after attaining Brahman, the individual self becomes manifest in his own true form. He's not going to get some celestial body. But later on, it's going to say you can get a body if you want, but it's not a karma body. It's very interesting. These are the siddhas that travel around the universe, free, liberated, but they can still travel around the universe. If you read the Puranic stories, they're great beings. They're liberated. They're not trapped by karma. Some of them, may absorb in their own nature, and they just, that's it. They're just pure consciousness. They don't have any form. But others take forms, but they're not trapped by them. They can take them as will. They can go anywhere they want. These are the siddhas. So this is mentioned here. What's not mentioned, because it's not in the Upanishads, is Ramanuja and the Vaishnava position that beyond this realm of Prakriti, in Brahman itself, there are realms made of condensed Brahman, condensed consciousness, the infinite realms of Vishnu and Krishna's Goloka. That doesn't enter into the Vedanta Sutra because it's not in the Upanishads. So anybody interested in the ultimate destination of the bhaktas in Vaishnavism, you will not get that information in the Vedanta Sutra. What you will get is, you have two options. Either you can be just absorbed, consciousness absorbed in its own nature, just infinite eternal awareness and awareness of nothing, just awareness of awareness, of no thing. When I say nothing, you are aware of consciousness. Consciousness is aware of consciousness. It's not void, a void, a sunya, but it is it's either that, or you can gain. Look, let's get to that. For now, let's just stick with this, and then we'll finish. I'll finish my sentence when we read those verses. After attaining Brahman, the individual self becomes manifest in its own true form. That's the Svarupa. That special condition into which the individual self passes at liberation is the manifestation of his own essential form, right? What condition do we normally, when we die, what condition do we pass into? Well, we pass into the next body, and that's conditioned by our karma. So we enter into a condition based on our karma. Now, what if you're liberated? No more karma. You've burnt all your karma. You've given up all desires. You've burnt your prarabdha karma. You're not sanchiyamana. You're not collecting new karma. There's no sanchitta karma. There's nothing to give you a further birth, but your present body dies because it's still a body, right? It's going to get old and die. What condition do you pass into then? And this verse says, the special condition. Why is it special? Because you're not being thrown into another body. That's pretty special. The special condition into which the individual self passes at death, the liberated, is the manifestation of his own essential form, his own pure Atman, with no coverings, no mind, nothing. Not the origination of a new form. Why? Ramanuja says, why do I say that? Because of the term in one's own. A body is not your own, it's something else. If you get a body, it's not your own then, is it? You might own it, you might you might inhabit it, but it's not you. It's not your own in an inherent sense. It's extrinsic to you, not inherent, not intrinsic to you. So, but the Upanishad says Sva, just like Patanjali says, Svarupa, in his own true form, would be meaningless if you took a body. Then the word Svarupa wouldn't mean anything, says Ramanuja. If we want to take Svarupa literally, then that condition, that special condition, has to be your Sva, your own nature, not some other body. So, okay, so that's that one. Let's go to verse 2. It is the released self only. Because of that being the subject, you don't try making sense of the sutra itself. You have to read the commentary. It is the released self, and even this is a lot more. There's only 3 words here. Muktaha pratigyanat, 2 words. Muktaha pratigyanat. So liberated because of pratigyanat, because of being informed. You can't. There's no way in Vedanta Sutra you can just read the sutras. Can't make sense of them, my friends. Some of Patanjali's like that, but a certain amount of Patanjali you can read it. You can read the yamas and the niyamas, and chapter 2 you could read without a commentary, a lot of it, but not Vedanta. Now, if the individual self's true form is eternally accomplished, it says the opponent, I think. Okay, so see, where does the Siddhanta begin? Look on page 481, right here. I'm going to have to learn how to use arrows and stuff. I mean, like highlight. See there? Oops, I'm crossing it out. No, that's no good. What if I do that? No, that's no good. So you see where it says the sutra? I need some. I'm going to get I'm going to lie flat at the feet of a student and beg them to teach me how to. Look, if I do this, highlight text, so the sutra, there, do you see it? Does everybody see it? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the answer. So everything before that is the Purva Paksha. When the sutra replies, what is that? What's that going to be?
Siddhanta.
Siddhanta. What's the opposing point of view?
Purva Paksha.
Purva means other, Paksha, side. Okay. Now, if the individual self's true form is eternally accomplished, says the opponent, if you say it's always there, then the declaration, it goes back to the same verse, he attains the supreme light and becomes manifest, would be meaningless. The opponent wants to say, oh, now I've got to get rid of that, otherwise it's going to follow me everywhere. Oops, okay. Now, says the opponent, what the text says about the released self is this, says the opponent. The individual self, freed from the contact with karmas, right? Everybody agrees on that. He's freed from karma, so he's going to drop his regular body. No argument there. So the individual self, freed from the contact with karmas and the body originated by them, right? A karmic body, this one we're in now, abides in his own true form. Therefore, even though the essential nature is eternally accomplished, it is obscured by nescience in the form of karma. And the removal of obscuration is called manifestation. So you get rid of your karma, and that true form manifests. Now, it is that cessation of nescience which is described here. The cessation of nescience. Why? And by the way, it's not always the same opponent. So don't think that the argument in one sutra, the next argument is going to be coming from the same school and therefore assuming the same metaphysics. No. Each Purva Paksha is completely different. Now, why? Because the release. I'm so sorry. That's not the Purva. This is the Siddhanta. I didn't see this thing down here. If the opponent argues, right, so here's the Purva Paksha. This is the Siddhanta, my friends. This is Ramanuja's position. What the text says about the released self is this. It doesn't say anything about attaining another body. The individual self, freed from the contact with karmas, and the body originated by them. Once we're freed from karma, and the body that karma gives us, abides in his own true form, sarupa. Therefore, even though the essential nature is eternally accomplished, even though you're always an Atman, you're always Sat, you're always Chit. Ananda's a little bit problematic, by the way, but I have some thoughts about it. But let's get this out. So therefore, even though the essential nature is eternally accomplished, means it always is there. It's always Sat. That's what Sat means, eternally existing. It's eternally accomplished. It is obscured by nescience in the form of karma. So it's covered over. It's there. That's why we exist. Even if we're in the body of a tree, we're still Sat. We're still Chit. And you could add, they don't, by the way. This is me talking now. This is me talking now. No one can deny that all embodied beings Sat exist. The Atman in the tree, in the bug, in the amoeba, in the giraffe, in the celestial, they're Sat. And you can certainly argue that they're conscious. You can say, you might say they're alive. A scientist might say they're alive. You could say they're conscious in some sort of way. The blade of grass is conscious. It knows when the sun rises. It moves towards the sun. All beings are in some way, they're conscious of their environment, otherwise can't survive. And you could, now they don't argue this is me now, so don't take it too seriously. You could argue that all beings have some level of ananda. It's massively covered. So for example, when it's a nice hot day and maybe it's rained all night and then that morning the sun comes, the tree, anyone that's a gardener can feel this. Can't you feel it when you go out or when you water your plants? Don't you see them perk up almost instantly? Bit dry, you give them a nice watering, you put them in the sun, and all of a sudden it's almost like they stand to attention. It's almost like they do a nice, what do you call Tadasana? Mary, help me. What do you call it when you do a standing pose and you almost feel that with your plants. So that's happiness. That's ananda for the plant. So therefore, every living creature, if it attains whatever it needs for survival, you could say that's a really elementary, massively covered over form of ananda. In the same way as its consciousness is covered over, the Sat isn't covered over because they just continue to be, they're all eternal. But the consciousness, that's why we think we can eat animals. Some people think they can eat animals because they say, well, they're not conscious like us, they're not intelligent like us. Well, from a Vedanta point of view, that's the same Atman in there. It's just that its consciousness is massively covered over. So you could say bliss, you could make a similar argument for bliss, that all creatures, when their environment favors them, they experience something that you could say is equivalent to happiness or some type of contentment. And I think a gardener knows that very well about their plants. When your plant is happy and it's not doing well, you move it to another place, where there's more sun or more, you water it more, and you just see it, you see it sort of become blissful, if you wanted to use that word. Okay. So now, it's obscured by nescience in the form of karma. Really what that is tamas. Because karma, everything is ultimately the gunas. All bodies and minds that our karma gives us bodies and minds, but those bodies and minds are the gunas. You can think of it in many different ways, but ultimately, it's ultimate metaphysical substructure of the gunas. So if something is massively covered, like a blade of grass, it's massively tamasic, but the Atman is still there. Okay, now, it is that cessation of nescience which is described here, when the soul is liberated. Why? Because the released self is the subject matter. Now he's going to give some scriptural reason. The released self is the subject matter in the passage. Which passage? We read it, the Chandogya. He who is the... Okay, so we're going to skip the quotes from the Upanishad. Therefore, well, we can read this a little bit. And to picture him as freed from the states of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. Those of you that know the Mundaka, in the Mandukya, you'll know the 4 states of consciousness: waking, sleep, and deep sleep. And the 4th is just called the Chaturta, or the Turiya, the 4th state beyond. And that's the state of consciousness that's right in waking state. You're conscious of the world out there. In the dream state, you're conscious of the mental world of samskaras. In deep sleep, you're conscious of the mind covered by tamas, deeply tamasic, right? Advaita Vedanta will say you actually experience Brahman in that state. And then the fourth state is when you're completely liberated from body and mind, and consciousness is conscious of consciousness. So to picture him as freed from the states of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, right? If you're freed from those three, you're in the fourth, which is the liberated. The Mandukya calls it the Turiya, the Chaturthi, the fourth. And as released from the body originated by the karmas. What causes the karma? Which are caused by love and hate, raga dvesha. Raga dvesha, I mean, ultimately, raga dvesha, as we know from Patanjali, is based on avidya, fine, ignorance of the self. But really, ignorance itself doesn't generate karma. Ignorance itself doesn't generate karma. Ignorance produces raga dvesha. Raga dvesha is what's generating the karma, because karma means action. Avidya is not action, it's just a state of mind. So avidya itself, if you were in just avidya and never moved, you wouldn't be making karma. But avidya causes us consciousness to identify with body mind, and then the body mind then trigger raga dvesha, then triggers action, because raga is I have a desire, and the Upanishads say very nicely, first there's a desire, then there's a sequencing, right? There's desire, then there's intention, and then there's a, you know, it frames it a little bit differently from Patanjali. All of these texts that frame it slightly differently, because they're different kinds of texts written by different kinds of authors, and they're not going to use the same vocabulary, and they're not going to use the same sequencing. But from desire, then I desire something, and then I form I get it. Gita would say you become attached to it, and then you act. So therefore, but action creates the reaction. It's action that creates the reaction. If you just desire something and don't act, you don't make any reaction. Although the Puranas would say in the Kali Yuga, in the previous Yuga, if you thought of something, even if you didn't act, you would get karma. But because Kali Yuga is so hopeless, then in the Kali Yuga, we can think, but we won't make karma from thinking. But actually, in the previous Yugas, previous ages, the Puranas say, thinking is an action, because you've moved your mind. If you say, I want an ice cream, you've created a vritti, right? There's an I, it flows into one. That's movement. So that's karma then. So karma means action, and that means reaction. So in the previous Yuga, you thought something, you got slammed with even if you nipped it in the bud, and you jumped up, did your tapas, oh, no, Nirodha heard the thought, too late, mate, too late. You're going to get slammed. Not in the Kali Yuga. But anyway, so it's really raga dvesha that actually causes the reaction. So, so the body originated by the karmas, which are caused by love and hatred, which is just this particular translator's way of rendering raga dvesha. Prajapati says again and again in the Upanishads, I will explain this self who is free from sin, again, the Chandogya. Therefore, with regard to him who is mixed with karma, and the non-liberated, after he attains the supreme light, okay, let's see what he says. After he attains the supreme light, final release, i.e. cessation of all bondage, is called manifestation in his own true form. So someone who, originally is mixed with karma, meaning he has a body, when that person becomes liberated and attains the supreme light, which is just a metaphor for final release of the body, which means now the consciousness is no longer trapped by body or mind, or antakarana, or the chitta. You call it antakarana, linga, sukshma sharira, so many names. When it says is manifestation in his own true form. The term manifestation denotes revelation of the nature of a thing already existent. So he's challenging the Purva-paksha. The Purva-paksha says manifestation means you get a new body. A new body manifests. Ramanuja says, no, that's not what it means. When something manifests, it was there all along. It's different from production. If you use the term production, well, production means something new, it comes to be from where it didn't exist previously. When you produce something, you might mix a few elements together, but you're producing something which didn't exist. That's what production means. Manifestation doesn't mean that. Manifestation means something becomes manifest, at least the way Ramanuja wants to take it, is it was kind of there, and you're going to see the example of the luster of the gem. It's actually there all along, but it's covered with dirt. The brilliance of the gem, when you wipe the gem, you're not actually creating the luster. The luster is just a property of the gem, but it's covered. So when you wipe the dirt off, the luster manifests, but really you're not producing it. You're just removing the obstruction. They use that precise metaphor. So therefore, that's what Ramanuja wants to say. Okay. So therefore, he doesn't like, so therefore, this is the difference between the two old schools, the Mimamsas and the Vedantins. They're both textually situated schools. Their highest pramana, their highest source of knowledge for both of them are the sacred texts. They don't reject sense, perception, or reason, but they say these are fallible. And they say remember Patanjali, what are the three pramanas? Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramanani, 1.7, right in the beginning. What are the pramanas? How do you know something? Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. So Patanjali is all about Pratyaksha. He never quotes, there's not a single Upanishadic passage in Patanjali. Not that he rejects it, he's assuming he already did that. He's assuming you're coming to him having studied the Upanishads of Vedanta. That's why he says Atta. That's one way of reading Atta Yoga Anushasana. Now, you did your study, Atta? Okay. Right. So the logicians, if we do the Nyaya Sutras later in the year, they're going to be all about Anumana, reason. They're also not going to quote any scriptures. And at the end of it all, they're going to say, oh, by the way, we've used reason to establish there's an Atman and an Ishvara, but if you want to experience them, do yoga. They're going to say that. So it's not that one school is opposing the others. They're just going about it in different ways. Vedanta's going about saying, yes, there's an Atman, there's an Ishvara because the scriptures say so. And now they have to, and because if they take that position, they've got to demonstrate that the scripture is coherent and non-contradictory. Otherwise, why should I listen? Your scripture tells me I'm an Atman, but your scripture is full of contradictions. It says this here. What value does it have as an authoritative source of knowledge? So you don't want that. So and that's in any religion. So you have to show that the scripture is coherent if you want people to take its instruction and its guidance and the information it imparts. And that's the job of Vedanta. But there's another scriptural school who are not interested in the Upanishads, but the old Rig Veda and the older texts, which are all about ritual, ritual, ritual. And the goal of that is a celestial body, not liberation. So now you have now you have two schools, both laying claim to the Vedic revelations, but different parts of it. The Vedanta is the Anta, the Veda Anta, the later Veda. So Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa, the earlier and the later parts of the Vedas. So therefore, Vedanta has to take on Mimamsa. Mimamsas, they know their scriptures. Are you kidding me? They know Sanskrit when they're two. Everyone else is kind of going, ma. Vedantins are quoting Rig Veda at two. These are formidable scholars, my friends. You don't mess with a Mimamsa unless you know your stuff. So the Vedantins have to take on the Mimamsas. So therefore, okay, so let's keep going. Right. Number 3. Now, what would the opponent say to all this? If the opponent argues, right, so now it tells you that it's an opponent. Sometimes it doesn't. It just says, if it be said, if the opponent argues the essential nature of the individual self in the state of deep sleep is not the goal of human endeavor, the teaching of the scriptures as regards final release will also not be beneficial to man. Thus, the attainment of another new condition of existence related to pleasure, like the condition of gods, constitutes manifestation in its own true form. So now Ramanuja says, well, the opponent's going to come up with another argument. Opponent's going to say, oh, your svarupa of, avasthanam, well, you get that in deep sleep. You already touched on it before. This svarupa, because after all, in deep sleep, your consciousness is not conscious of the world out there, and it's not consciousness of your mind and dream. So it's svarupa, then it's a kind of a svabrupa. It's got nothing to be conscious of. And if it's got nothing to be conscious of, because tamas has covered the mind, if it's got nothing to be conscious of, then it's not going to be not conscious. It can't be not conscious because it's sat, it's eternal. So therefore its qualities are eternal. So if consciousness is sat, and it's therefore it's eternally, right? Sat meaning ongoingly conscious. If sat chit are two qualities of the Atman, inseparable. So as long as there's sat, there's going to be chit, there's conscious. Well, okay, fair enough. When it's awake, it's conscious of the world. Okay. When it's dreaming, it's conscious of the samskaras in the mind. We call that dream. But in deep sleep, it's got nothing to be conscious of. That doesn't mean it's not conscious, though. So therefore, that sounds to me, says the opponent. The opponent says that sounds to me like your liberation, because in that state, you're sva rupa. You've removed. Deep sleep has removed all objects of consciousness. So therefore, the Atman is in a sva rupa state. The opponent says, I'm not interested in that. What kind of a state is that? Says the opponent. Look. He says the opponent argues the essential nature of the individual self in the state of deep sleep. Top of page 481. No, missed a word. It's not the goal of human endeavor. You don't have to endeavor for that. You don't have to go sit in the forest and do tapas and Brahma, and you just go to sleep. And what endeavor is that? You're forced to anyway, sooner or later. You can't keep running around. There's no endeavor involved. You just collapse and fall asleep. So therefore, the teaching of the scriptures as regards final release will not be beneficial to man, says the opponent. All of the scriptures telling us that about, release is going to be beneficial, and it's going to be blissful. That doesn't make sense if liberation's just like deep sleep, when consciousness is in its own nature. So therefore, says the opponent, what does the opponent want then liberation to be? Here, thus the attainment of another new condition of existence, right? The opponent is the Mimamsa ritualist who wants to go to the celestial realm and get a celestial body. So the attainment of another new condition, not something already sva in you, not a sva rupa, it's already always there. That's useless. That's just you experience it in deep sleep. No, it's got to be another new condition. New means it's not already with you. You've got to get a new body, a celestial one, another new condition of existence related to pleasure. Like what? Like the condition of the gods with the little g, not Vishnu or Shiva. These are the celestials. Constitutes manifestation in his own true form. So this is the verse right at the beginning of Sutra 1, the manifestation in his own true form. That's the opponent. Okay, we clear? The sutra replies to this objection. Now we get the Vedanta response to the Mimamsa, the ritualist. We understand from the context, right? Same verse, they're all debating the same verse, which is Chandogya 8:7. We read it at the beginning. Here, Chandogya 8:14. Oh, we don't have time to read the actual verse. Yeah, we're going to run out of time. Right. We understand from the context, Chandogya, blah, blah, that the individual self in his essential nature possesses attributes beginning with freedom from all evil and ending with true will. The Vedanta says that free will is in the Atman. Here it is. Often in these workshops, we've had discussions where is free will? Where is agency? Who's the doer? Who's responsible for the Atman situation in a karmic body? Vedanta says the Atman has free will. So here is an example of that. So when the individual self in his essential nature, in other words, svarupa, what are the attributes? Well, he possesses what kind of attributes does that free, pure self has? Well, freedom from all evil, no kleshas, aklishta, 100%. no vidya, no avidya, none of the kleshas, and ending with true will. There's a list because the teachings, and then he quotes the Upanishads to prove his point. The self who is free from sin, free from old age, free from death, free from hunger and thirst, and whose desires and will are true. Very interesting. The Upanishads say that desires are also in the Atman, pure desires, not the raga dvesha of the avidya, coming from avidya, which are raga dveshas for the body, mind. No, but there are desires in the Atman, which of course bhaktas will say, what is the pure desire? The desire to serve Bhagavan, not to serve my body, mind, to serve Bhagavan in love and devotion. Otherwise, you're a machine, my friends, if you don't have free will. If you don't have free will, you're just an and then you can't explain karma. If there's no free will, then all Atmans are the same. Then why is one Atman making good karma and another Atman making bad karma? If the Atman is not doing it, then what? The mind and body are doing it, but they're machines. They're overlays. There has to be free will in the Atman. Some schools reject that, but think about it. Chandogya Upanishad says the desires in the Atman, doesn't develop it. What does that mean? Ramanuja is going to say, yes, you have free will and desires, but you can do nothing with it unless you're given instruments by Bhagavan. And you're either giving instruments, if you want to use your free will and desire to enjoy for yourself, then you're in the realm of Prakriti, and then you're given Prakritic body, mind to try to enjoy for yourself, and every action has a reaction. And then you keep churning around samsara until you realize, I can get no satisfaction. I cannot find that deep level bliss that I've been seeking in any material thing. When you realize that, and in Ramanuja's tradition, then you turn to Bhagavan. When you get liberated, when you practice in this realm, with this body, with this mind, you practice offering all thoughts and all deeds and all actions to Bhagavan, which is the bhakti of the Bhagavad Gita. Yat karosi, yat dashnasi, yat johosi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurusva madarpanam. Everything you do, everything you eat, everything you offer, do it all as an offering to me. Bhagavad Gita, my friends. This is bhakti. So when you do that and you get to in Prakriti, 100%, you're not going to get all this in Vedanta. You get it in Ramanuja's own writings. But you see how the seeds are there in the Upanishads. The seeds are there. They're in the Chandogya. The Atman has free will and desires. So then when you get to 100%, then you die. Then you get a spiritual body, not a celestial one, my friends. Let's make a distinction. A celestial body is still a prakritic body. It is temporary. It's just another body, like a dog body, a tree body, a cat body, and a celestial body. It is a karma body. What is a karma body? It's made by karma. Karma is not infinite. You know, 100 units of karma gives you a celestial body, but once you've enjoyed that 100 units of karma, the karma's over, then the body's over then. The body is produced by karma, and when that which produces it has become extinguished, has expired, then the body falls apart and goes back into the elements, and the subtle body goes back down to its next cluster of samskaras. So a karma body is necessarily a temporary body. But a devotional body is eternal. But none of that's in the Vedanta. You have to read Ramanuja, Madhva, the 16th century theologians, the Vaishnava Bhaktas, if you're interested in Bhakti, which is my own tradition. Or you can be Swarupa Vastanam, nobody at all. You either have a Prakritic body. Look, your Atman is like a battery. Your Atman is either in a Prakritic body generating karma, realizes it's suffering. So logically it says, I'm suffering because I'm trying because of this material body and mind. So let's mean Nirodha the whole lot then. And then what happens? Swarupe Vastanam. Then you're all infinitely in this state of bliss, because the Brihad said it's bliss, the Taittiriya. Eternal infinite bliss. Option number 2. Option number 3 is bhakti, where you realize there's another Atman, a Paramatman, a Param Adishvara, Bhagavan, and instead of your svarupa, which is a kind of selfishness, what else is it? Self. It's sva. What does sva mean? Self. So selfishness, high level selfishness, very high level, the real selfishness. I mean the real selfishness, right? So not in the mundane sense of selfishness, but the self in its own nature. Why isn't that selfish? It's just we have to apply a whole new dimension of understanding of what that term means in this context. But if you become attracted to this supreme self, then how are you going to do bhakti? What does that mean? But if Bhagavan is eternal and you're eternal, what are you, just globs of consciousness, like blobbing about? What does that look like? So therefore you receive spiritual forms, and Vishnu has infinite forms, and you'll receive a spiritual form, not made of consciousness, not temporary. And according to your wish, because you're an agent, your free will, you get to have the kind of loving relationship with Bhagavan you want. You want to be a gopi. I mean, the Krishna tradition, we have access to the Bhagavata Purana of 3 or 4 of these kinds of relationships. We get a little bit of a window. The Bhagavata Purana gives us a window in what relationship, what are these eternal relationships? What might they look like? So then you get a spiritual body. So Prakritic body, no body, your own Svarupa, spiritual body. Those are the options, my friends. Pick your spiritual path wisely. Well, what does that mean? Pick it from an informed place, my friends. Inform yourself what the options are, just as you do in anything else, any other endeavor. You want to go traveling for vacation? Well, find out where you want to go then. Don't just jump on a plane. But you get arrested at security. Right. So then what is the conclusion here? Ramanuja, therefore the attributes of knowledge, bliss, right? Satchit Ananda. Remember, knowledge means chit, not jnana yoga like the Gita. This is where it's confusing. If I were to translate this, I would translate it as consciousness, not knowledge. Right. So the attributes of knowledge, bliss, etc., which undergo contraction by karmas. It gets contracted, it gets covered. Just like the light of a bulb. If you put it, in a box, it's contracted. It can't seep out. It's blocked. That's what he means by contracted. The light is always going to be the light. You cannot take the light away from the light, but you can contract it. You can seal it in a container, which is what the gross body and mind are. So therefore, the attributes of knowledge, bliss, etc., which undergo contraction by karmas, manifest in the form of expansion when the bondage in the form of karmas is destroyed and the self reaches the supreme light. Consciousness is contracted, it's stuck in this body. They can only seep out as far as the eyes can see, the ears can hear, the nose can smell. It only has access, it can only be conscious of the range allowed by its karmic senses, karmically bestowed and created senses. So I can only see, the tree out there. I can't see, California. But when these layers or karmic, he's calling them contractions, are removed, then nothing can stop consciousness. Like light. We talk about light, traveling 14 billion years or 8 billion years or whatever it is. Nothing can stop it. If there's no atmospheric obstacle or there's no blockages, light will just keep traveling. So consciousness will. That's the meaning of infinite. And the definition of Brahman right in the beginning, Taittiriya, ananta, no end, ananta, infinite. Infinite means it is infinite. There's no finite. There's no finito. There's no finishing. Finitude. In, opposite. So we could just call it eternal. Just the same word. No terminuses. Eternal. No terminuses. A terminus is a finishing point. Terminal. Right, now, next verse is experience of inseparableness and liberation. So the question is whether the individual self who has reached the supreme light and freed from all bondage experiences his own self as separate from the supreme self or as inseparable from him. Notice the difference. Are you separate from God or inseparable? Means you're separate, but you can never be away from God. You're always, if you bhakti means you're in love with God. You never want to be away from your beloved. Do you see the difference? Shankara is not going to read this verse in the same way, my friends. I think you should know Shankara well enough now to know he's not going to talk about eternal being inseparable from God. So Ramanuja is going to read this very different. So what's the doubt for Ramanuja here? The doubt is this freed self, who's right, completely liberated, has reached the supreme light, right, which is Brahman, freed from all bondage. Everybody agrees, right? Now, and he experiences his own self. He's attained he's a pure Atman, Svarupa. Now, in that state, Patanjali just leaves us there. He doesn't take us any further. He just leaves us as Svarupa. The Bhaktas would say, well, hang on, you're just going to sit, you're going to be stuck in Svarupa all eternity. Well, wake me up when you got something to do, right? The Bhaktas want to have infinite, variegated, loving relationship, variegatedness with their beloved God. They won't be stuck in a Svarupa. They actually, Bhagavatam says it's hell. Why is it hell? Because it's separate from their beloved Bhagavan. When you're in your Svarupa, you're not aware of anything else. You're not aware of God or anything. So therefore, so what's the doubt for Ramanuja? Then we'll have a quick look at Shankara. We'll see how it's going to be very different here. So the doubt is he separate or inseparable? Inseparable means you're separate, but you never leave. If you're having inseparable, like your dog is inseparable. It's not like you are the dog or you merge. No, the dog is inseparable, means is a distinct entity, but always by your side. This is what the Bhaktas want, Bhagavan. So he says, are you separate? Are you just like, doing your own thing, or inseparable? This is the doubt. The opponent, what does the opponent say? What's the name for the opponent? Purvapaksha, affirms the former. The opponent says, you're separate. And because of the Shruti and the Smriti, right? The Shruti are the Vedic texts, the Smriti are the later texts like the Puranas and the Mahabharata. Remember that which is heard and that which is remembered. So these are the sacred texts. So from both of those, we understand, says the opponent, the released self is closely connected with the supreme self, has similarity with him. You can have the same form, Shivoham, in Shaiva Siddhanta. The Shaiva equivalent of Vaishnavism is called Shaiva Siddhanta. The liberated, those who worship Shiva as their Ishvara. Remember, Ishvara has infinite forms and beautiful forms of Shiva. In one school, there's two main schools of Shaivism. One is Kashmir Shaivism, where you become Shiva. You kind of merge, you become Shiva. And Vaishnavas have their own way of understanding what that means ontologically. And the Shaiva Siddhanta school, where you become like Shiva. But there's a big difference, and I'll tell you ahead of time. And the Vaishnavas also say, you can have a form like Vishnu. You can have a form like Vishnu. What's the difference between the soul and Vishnu? Well, lots of differences, but the one that the Vedanta is going to talk about in the next verses is that you can do anything you want, in even Patanjali in the Mystic Powers, chapter 3, you can be omnipotent within a universe. You can't create a universe. That's the ultimate difference between God and the highly accomplished liberated soul. Can be omniscient and omnipotent. Read Patanjali, 3rd chapter, makes very grandiose claims. Omnipotent and omniscient within a universe. So then how are you different? Bhagavan creates the universe, not just one, infinite universes. How about that for a difference? So therefore you can have a form like Vishnu or Shiva if that's what you want, and let's keep reading. So therefore the opponent says, you're separate. He has similarity with Ishvara, attributes similar to him, including form. And he quotes his Taittiriya. You can't just say stuff. You got to quote a verse. He attains all the attributes, says the Taittiriya Upanishad, along with the omniscient Brahman. Vedanta also says you can be omniscient as a liberated Atman. And yet, in spite of the close relation, he feels that he is separate from Brahman. Remember, Brahman is Ishvara, is Bhagavan. That's the opponent saying, yep, you can have a form like Bhagavan, but you're separate. The Sutrakara rejects this view and says that the released self experiences own self as inseparable from. That doesn't mean you merge. There's no language here about losing your individuality. No, you remain an individual in Ramanuja's philosophy. It's Shankara who says you lose your individuality, not the Vaishnavas. We've been fed so much neo-Advaita in the West since the 60s. People assume that Hinduism or Vedanta means kind of losing your individuality, merging. No, my friends, that's one school of Vedanta. Majority of all the other schools, all of them, all the other 6 schools of philosophy, Mimamsa, Sankhya, Yoga, most of Vedanta, Buddhism, Jainism, all of them assert, most Buddhist schools assert that you remain an individual, whether in samsara or all liberated, either way, you're always an individual. Never merge. Some Advaita Vedanta says you merge, in some Shakta traditions like Kashmiri Shaivism, certain Shakta traditions are also, monism means mono, only one, no individuals. So those are the two that, so there are traditions that say you lose your individuality. Certainly not Ramanuja here. Right. So what is the relationship? So the scriptures say that the released self perceives himself in his own true nature. What is this true nature? It consists in having the supreme self as the self of the individual. We are supported by God, just like we are the self of the body. Well, God is our self, but not in a merging way, as a distinct being. God is the sustainer, the support. Even in Bhakti, God gives us the spiritual bodies with which we can love him and serve him and interact with him. And if you want to be a Krishna Bhakta, you can play with him and just have tons of fun. So, or you might just prefer, or in reverence, Narayana, Vishnu. It's magnificent. Just, you know, you're just, it's so, God is so incredibly beautiful and majestic. You can spend all eternity gazing at God and never get bored. That's called Aishvarya Bhav. Love in the mood of Aishvarya, magnificence. And I mean, look, if you see a magnificent sunset, you can sit and watch it for an hour. Or if you see a magnificent painting in the Met, you can sit on there, little benches. You can sit there and look at it for 20 minutes. Well, that's some useless material thing. If God is infinite, he's got to be infinitely beautiful, infinitely wonderful. That means you can behold him infinitely. And that's one kind of liberation. It's called Shantabhav. If you want that, that's a wondrous thing. But I think that the Bible is more in that line of things. There's nothing in the Bible about stealing butter and feeding monkeys. I don't see Yahweh getting down on the golden throne and saying, all right, where are the monkeys? Come on, lads, bring it. Let's get, where's the butter? I want to steal some butter. But you do get this kind of Narayana type mood. Throne, right? All of that. But no, you're not bored. It's not God. If God is infinite, his wonders and the experience of whatever experience you have with God, whether it's just visually beholding, it's going to be infinite and you're fully satisfied by it. So here we are. So having the supreme self as the self of the individual, while the individual constitutes his body. So he likes this example. He doesn't mean it literally. He says, look, just like our self supports, our Atman supports the body, he uses that as analogy. So just as our Atman supports the body, without the Atman, the body just can't do anything. So the Atman is providing consciousness to the body. So this world and all the souls are like the body of God. He's not saying they are the body of God. He's not saying God is somehow some soul in the universe, like we have a soul in our bodies. No, he's saying it's like that, just as our soul is distinct from the body, sustains the body, and the body cannot do anything without the soul. So God is like that for the whole universe and all the souls. He sustains the world, sustains the souls, but it doesn't mean he's just sort of trapped in some kind of a cosmic body. That's why there's infinite forms. So there's a form of God that is involved with creation and maintenance. There's other forms of Bhagavan that they're, of course, they don't have a job to do. If you say God is a creator, you've just trapped God in a kind of you trapped him in a kind of a dharma, right? My dharma, your dharma is a yoga teacher, and Arjuna's dharma is a warrior. If you say God is a creator, well, now he's not. He's limited, then, isn't he? He's no longer free. I mean, you could say, well, he chooses to do, well, fine, but you're still you're still constrained, like every yuga, regularly, 14 billion years, okay, creation, okay, now sleep, 14 billion. There's a kind of you're kind of constrained. So in the Vaishnava tradition, there are forms of Vishnu to do that, but not the ultimate forms. They're simply engaging in love with their bhaktas. No work to do. When there's work to do, then they manifest a lower form of Vishnu, and that's the Vishnu we read about. That's the Vishnu we know about, the creator Vishnu. And so, like the same with Krishna. Krishna is just playing with love. Play means love, playful, right? Love is playful. Right? Don't you want a God that's just love? That means no work, doesn't it? Well, creation's work, my friends. Build a garden shed and see how much work it is, and then just project that onto the universe. That's work. But the ultimate form of God can't be working, prosaically. So when Ramanuja talks about God in that look, he says here, it consists in having the supreme self as the self of the individual, while the individual constitutes his body and is hence its mode. What he means is that he's just using the metaphor. We have to have some kind of metaphor. What is the relationship between God and us? Well, it's like us and our body. We support the body, so God supports us. That's all he means. And then, of course, he can't just come up with his own little metaphor, and he quotes all of these verses. We're skipping over these verses. Do you see how you could spend a lifetime studying this, my friends? And then chasing down all of these verses when they quote them? Then looking to see, well, what does Shankara say? I mean, that's good for a year or two, but I mean, God, I'd rather just chant kirtan and do japa and do puja and read the 10th book of the Bhagavatam. But to each his own. Now, all right, so that's that. But we want to read Shankara. Shankara is going to be very different, my friends. But I want you to be informed consumers. So what does Shankara say? Verse 4. He doesn't accept any duality between God and the self. So what 4? Did we just read verse 4? Was that what we just read, Ramanuja? Yeah, 4. Let's see what Shankara says. For him, Ishvara is just a symbol. No, that's not helpful. Why did I write down 4 on my little piece of paper? Did I write down 4? I want you to read some classic Shankara. Just give me a second. I wrote it all down and I've covered it up. Oh, here we are. Shankara. 4, but this isn't. Are we in the right? Oh, no, we're in 4.1. I beg your pardon. We got to go to 4.4. Let's shoot down here. 4.4. 4.4. 4.4.10. We want 4.4.4. Okay, here, 4.4.4. Okay. The jiva in the state of liberation exists on the bottom of the right-hand page as inseparable from Brahman, for it is so seen from the scriptures. So far, so good. He sounds like Ramanuja. The question is raised, says Shankara, 200 years earlier than Ramanuja, whether the jiva in the state of liberation exists as different from Brahman or as one with an inseparable from. So both Ramanuja and Shankara recognize what the question is. They don't always, They don't always agree on what the sutra is, what question the sutra is raising, but here they do. The sutra says that it exists as inseparable from Brahman. For the scriptures say, Tattvamasi, that thou art, famous. I am Brahman. These are the Mahavakyas. Does anybody remember the Mahavakyas? I'm not going to quiz you. Remember the Mahavakyas, you're right? Turn the other cheek in Christianity, do unto others. So these are the great sayings. So these are two of Shankara's, Tattvamasi. Being bright, so he quotes these Mahavakyas. Oh, but now, what does it mean to him? All these texts declare that the released soul is identical with Brahman. That's not the same as inseparable. Identical means you are. There's no individuality. This is dvaita, no dva, duo, tuo, two, dvu, right? Dv is cognate. So then he says, passages which speak of difference have to be explained in a secondary sense as expressing unity. Do you see what he's saying? He has to recognize that there are passages talking about difference. What he said, those we have to interpret them in a secondary sense. Do you see? Do you see what Vedanta is all about? You like it, if you like a passage, I read it primary. I read it literally. You don't like it, I don't like that one. Well, we read it as secondary. It doesn't really mean the distinction. It means, unity. So this is Vedanta, my friends. That's why personally I think it's useless for this spiritual guidance. I think it's great for the intellect and your immersion. If you really want to study Advaita, you should read Shankara writing his own without being constrained by the scripture. And the only book that Shankara has written, that scholars, and some scholars even debate whether he wrote it, is called the Upadesha Sahasra, the 1,000 teachings. If you want to read Shankara, not constrained by the Upanishads, so he doesn't have to say, we'll read this primary in a primary sense, read this other one in a secondary sense. If you don't want to do that, and if you're finding that, this is okay, intellectually it's interesting, but I'm not getting anything. If one person can say the soul is individual, the other says, no, it merges. If one can say that the world is real, the other says, no, it's unreal. If one says God, Ishvara is the highest truth, the other says, no, Ishvara is secondary, superimposition. What's the good in a text that gives you completely, that allows you to interpret the text in these completely distinct ways? It's no good for the point of view of guidance, unless you're deeply immersed in a lineage and you just say, okay, I'm accepting this lineage. I'm going to accept Shankara, and that's it. My guru says so. My guru, I accept my guru, and he's an Advaita. Well, fine, that's nothing wrong with that. But so this is Vedanta. Okay. So Shankara then has this very different way of, all right, let's move on. So then we have another little question. We're running out of time. Let's get to the Ishvara verses. Oh my goodness, 731. What's the difference between the soul and Ishvara? And now once you're liberated, if you don't want to be Sarupe Vastanam, you can have anything you wish. But remember, you're going to be pure, so your wishes are not going to be filtered through body mind. But you still, if you see all of Prakriti as nothing other than the Shakti of your beloved Bhagavan, you can wander around Prakriti as the Siddhas do around the universe, and you can just marvel in the glorious Shakti of Bhagavan, but your relationship is not, it's not body mind, you're getting something out of it. It's just a form of bhakti where you're just adoring the wonders of your Bhagavan manifest through creation. So that there's going to be verses that talk about this as a possible state in liberation. If we have time, we'll read them. I just wanted to get to the distinction between Ishvara and the soul. And we'll come back to these verses. By the mere will, the released self realizes all wishes, those verses. Okay. Before we get to Ishvara, he quotes different sages, and he says, when you're released, can you exist with or without a body? 10. There is the absence of body, says somebody called Badari. So a great sage, so the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is quoting a sage called Badari. And Badari says, when you're liberated, Sutra 10, there's an absence of body. So a doubt naturally arises, bottom of the page. Which page are we on? 486. A doubt naturally arises whether the released self possesses body and senses or not, or whether he has them or not according to his will. The sage Badari, ooh, gosh, what happened there? The sage Badari sorry, my friends, I should just click here. The sage Badari says that the released self does not possess body and senses. Why? Because the scripture says so. What does the scripture say? Okay, we're on the top of page 487. As long as he is embodied, there is no freedom from pleasure and pain, says the scripture. Pleasure and pain do not touch him when he's freed from the body, because pleasure and pain are felt in the body. The body that experiences pain, and it's your body that experiences pleasure, or your mind. So the scripture says, so if you're freed from body and mind, then you're free of pleasure and pain. So the opponent says, the scripture says that pleasure and pain are unavoidable as long as one has connection with the body. So therefore, liberation, you don't want a body, because surely you want to be ananda, you want to be free of pain, right? So that's Badari's opinion. And now he quotes another. The Vedanta quotes these different sages. Now, Jaimini has the opposite opinion. This is the Mimamsa ritualist. The released self possesses a body and senses, considers Jaimini, because the text declares manifoldness. So Jaimini quotes other verses in the same Upanishads that speak about the liberated self having a body. So now, those are the two they're not really Purva-pakshas in this case. They're just differences of opinion. And so what is Badarayana? Badarayana is the author of Vedanta Sutra, also known as Vyas, Veda Vyas. Badarayana holds that the released self is of both kinds. You can have a body or not. You can be Svarupa Vastanam and just abide in pure consciousness with no objects of awareness, or you can have, now they're talking about celestial bodies here, which is not the spiritual bodies that I was talking about in Vaishnavism. But you can have some kind of subtle body, but you're liberated. So you're not bound by karma. You're not trapped. You can go anywhere in the universe you want, do anything you want. There's no karma bondage, and you're free from all the kleshas. So why would you want to wonder about the universe then? It's a good question. But as a bhakta might say, well, I just marvel at the glorious creation of Bhagavan. So a bhakta answer to that question: why, if you're free of desire, why do you want a body and wander around the universe? Surely that it indicates desire. Well, a bhakta would say, it's not desire for me. I don't have a body mind. I'm a pure soul. But it's a desire to Bhagavan and to just to marvel at the wonders of Bhagavan. So I'm not marveling to enjoy for me. I'm marveling to just to marvel at God, my beloved God. So that would be a bhakta answer. I'm not sure what other kinds of answers would make sense. But Badarayana self says, top of 488, the released self can exist both ways, with or without the body. Okay, so then it has and also, by the way, you can enter many different bodies. Like we'll look at Patanjali here. If you wanted to, there's the Siddhas. The Siddhas can be present. Many traditions talk about saints, even Christian traditions, and even the Greeks, like Plotinus, claim that Christian mystics can be, there's the Padre Pio, actually, in our own time, in our own life, there were devotees of Padre Pio who swore that he was both in some place in Italy and simultaneously in some other place. This is a siddhi that is recognized by Sufis, Buddhists, the ability of, obviously an empirical scientist is going to just scoff at it, but our interest is not whether it's true or not. We're reading the Vedanta Sutras, And we're seeing what the Vedanta Sutras say, and you can make whatever you want of it, do whatever you want with it. It's not for me to tell you these things are true or not. But the idea of a person being multi-presences of the same person is not just a Hindu one. You find it in numerous traditions. So here's the verse speaking to that. The entrance into many bodies by the released self is like that of a lamp. Right? How is it like a lamp? It has been stated that the individual self is of atomic size. It's the Upanishads say you take the tip of a hair, divide it into 10,000 parts. That's the size of the Atman. Obviously, it's being rhetorical, like bliss, 10 to the power of 12, 10 to the power of 20. It's being rhetorical, but just to point to it's infinitesimal, right? Just like infinite bliss. What's infinite bliss? Okay, 10 to the power of 12 of human bliss. All right, says the Taittiriya. Oh, 10 to the power of 20 says the Brihad. Right. It's just trying to give us a sense that our quantitative mind can grasp. So likewise, what is the opposite? That's infinite. What's the opposite? Infinitesimal. We don't know what that means. Everything, we can only think of things with size, right? Even the amazing smallness of the subatomic particles, it's mind-boggling, like 10 with all these zeros. But we can't think of something that's infinitesimal. So the Upanishad says, well, take the hair and the tip of the hair and cut it into 10,000. That's the size, right? So this is what he's referring to. It has been stated. Let me throw a log on the fire. Whenever it says it has been stated, it's the Upanishads. It has been stated. What has been stated? That this individual self is atomic, but it doesn't mean atom, it means infinitesimal, anu. It may be asked how the atomic size self regards many bodies as his own. How can something that's infinitesimal have many bodies? So then the lamp metaphor is given. Just as a lamp existing in one place only pervades other places through its light. So I could have the lights on in this room, but the light will reach the next room, and if you have the doors open, the one light can fill up several rooms. So he gives that example. So in the same way, the same one Atman can have multiple bodies. Just as a lamp existing in one place only pervades other places through its light, so also the individual self, the Atman, abiding in one body pervades all the bodies through its attributive consciousness, like its extended consciousness, and makes them his own. However, there is this much difference. What's the difference then between these? Let's say you have 5 bodies, and the yogi is now entered, like the lamp enters 5 rooms. So the yogi's will and consciousness and desire, like according to Chandogya, is Atman, is now present in the 5 bodies. What's the difference then between the 5 bodies? Are they like clones? No, there is this much of difference. What's that? The attributive consciousness of the individual self in bondage is contracted by the influence of karma, and as such, it cannot pervade other bodies. So when we're trapped by karma, we can't do this. Because karma, what is karma? What is karma? I mean, you think of it many ways, but one way you can think of karma is that which traps us in a body. That's what karma is. Really, that's what it is. The fruit of karma is a body. Jati ayurboga, Patanjali says. What is karma? Jati ayurboga, paritapa, sati mule, tadvipaka, jati ayurboga. As long as there's karma, tadvipaka, it manifests. What does that mean? Jati, your body, in a particular species. And ayur, how long you stay in it, and boga, quality of life. So karma is nothing other than jati ayur boga, or your body. So normally we are on the influence of karma, and as such it cannot pervade other bodies. But the attributive consciousness of the released self. So when you're liberated, I don't know why anybody would want to do this. This is very curious. Why would anybody want to do this? Enter other bodies. Surely you would do that because you had some. I don't see how you can be a pure soul. This is puzzling to me. free of all desires. And then why would you want to enter into 5 bodies and unless you had a desire to do 5 things at the same time? But surely that's a desire. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand. I see this as a very elevated. I don't see this as a pure. It's hard for me to fit this into the category of completely and utterly no kleshas at all. But anyway, let's read on. The attributive consciousness of the released self, whose consciousness is not contracted. It's not contracted, meaning limited by the one body, pervades other bodies as he wills it and makes them his own, right? And you find something very similar. We have to take this seriously, because look at Patanjali. Created minds are made from ego only. That one ego, this is chapter 4. There is one mind among the many created by the yogi, which is the director in the different activities of the different bodies. He same phenomenon in chapter 4 of Patanjali, that the accomplished yogi can enter different bodies, but the one mind of the body is controlling those other, let's say, 5 bodies. So but they can all do different things. They're not clones. It's not like if the body in the yogi's central mind is in one body, and he extends that mind into other bodies. It's not that they all then have to do the same thing. He can control them. So notice the same claim here. If you want to read the commentaries on this, you'll see it pretty much maps onto what we're reading here in the Vedanta. Let's get to Ishvara, my friends. I don't know what you're making of all of this. Right. 17. The released self has no part in cosmic activities. This is the distinction between the self and Ishvara. The released selves attain all powers of the Lord, except in the matter of cosmic activities, meaning creation. On account of the Lord being the subject matter, don't worry about that. Okay, the doubt is raised whether the power of the released self, right, because he's now free from karma, he can enter into bodies, he can pervade the whole universe. He can know everything in the universe because his consciousness is no longer, right? We know the room. I know this room because my consciousness can pervade the room, right? Pervades this room. I know, I can see everything. I know everything about it, right? But I can't know very much more because my eyes don't see much further. So I maybe see my yard out there. That if you're not blocked at all, you know your consciousness can pervade the whole universe. So what does that mean then? You're conscious of the whole universe. What does that mean then? You're omniscient. You scio omni. You scio, science, scio, to know. You can. So it sounds grandiose, but it's not incoherent with Sankhya yoga philosophy. If your consciousness really is delimited by the body, I mean, look at it this way. You may have heard me say this before. Imagine an Atman is an ant. So how far can it see? Not very far. What's it conscious of? Very little. It can, see a little bit, hear a little bit, feel a little bit. Now imagine it dies and becomes an elephant. The same Atman can now see a lot further and hear a lot further and smell a lot further. What does that mean? It means that the consciousness of the ant can expand and contract. If you accept that, if you accept the principle of reincarnation, actually, if you accept reincarnation, my friends, you are accepting the fact that consciousness can expand in a bigger body and contract in a smaller body. You never thought about it that way, but that's what you just signed on for if you accept reincarnation. Now, if so far so good, then that if it can expand and contract, well, what's to stop it expanding? Elephant's body, bit bigger. What if you get rid of the elephant's body and the elephant's mind then? What's going to stop it? See where you're going to end up? Nothing. Nothing's going to block it if it doesn't have a body mind. So then what? Well, then it can pervade the whole universe. But what does that mean? Omniscience. I mean, take it or leave it. But that's pretty much what you sign on for if you accept reincarnation. You're signing on for the reality, if you accept it. You're signing on to a part of that belief in reincarnation is the belief that the soul in the ant can become an elephant. or a vulture. Let's just go with one sense, with 5 senses, but let's just stick with one. Ant can't, I don't even know how far can they see? Very little. And that's why they're always in line. They're like, oh, just stick right behind my mate in front here. Otherwise, I can only see like 2 inches. I better stay in line. Otherwise, I'm screwed. So therefore, now it becomes the vulture. It can see 2 miles. So what does that mean? Consciousness can, because he has different ocular equipment, allowing consciousness to go further. So that means consciousness in principle can go further or less. That's what reincarnation means. And if you accept that, then the next question you could ask yourself is, well, why should it stop at all then? If there's no ocular equipment and no mental covering and no bodily limitations. Think it through. That's what they're talking about. Ananta, right in the beginning. It's infinite. We think of it Satchit Ananda. How about we throw in another property? Ananta, no, it's infinite potentially right now. With all that said, how is it different from Ishvara then? The doubt is raised whether the power of the released self contains also that of lordship means Aishvarya or Ishatritva, the nature of being God. So you have all these powers. You can be omnipotent. You can do anything you want. If you're a Siddha, then you can know everything. How come aren't you now Ishvara? Not here, not Vedanta. So the question is raised whether the power of the released self contains also that of lordship of all, and which extends up to cosmic creation. Do your powers extend that far that you can create a universe? And which is distinctive of the supreme person. This is how God is distinct from the qualified Siddha, the qualified perfected soul. Creation. Soul can do all kinds of siddhis, but not create a universe, according to Vedanta. The opponent holds the former. The opponent says, yeah, you can do everything Ishvara does. And then why? Because the scriptural text, and he quotes his scriptural texts. And it was also mentioned, right, says the opponent, that according to the scripture, the released self has the power of realizing all his wishes and attainment of equality and realizing all wishes. If you can really realize all wishes, well, then how about creation? That's a wish. The text says, said the opponent says, well, we just read the text, says the opponent, that the released soul can attain all his wishes. Well, then what if he wishes to create a universe? That's a wish. So therefore, he can create a universe because the text says so. To this objection, the sutra replies, the Siddhanta now comes. The released selves possess all the powers of Ishvara with the exception of cosmic activity, meaning creation. Remember that what is the second sutra of the whole Vedanta we read, right? 6 weeks ago. First sutra. Now we're going to talk about Brahman. What is the definition of Brahman? Janmadiyasya yataha, the creation of the universe. And now the discussion is, that's the defining feature of what distinguishes the category of God from the category of soul. I don't think Christians would have a problem with this. They might not like the idea of omniscience within a universe, but they would agree at least that the soul cannot create, God can, a universe. So the released selves possess all the powers of the Lord with the exception of cosmic activity. You can't create and maintain and destroy the universe. Remember, there's 3 things. Janma, Adi, Asya, but creation, etc. The second sutra. What's etc.? What's etc.? Not just creation, but maintenance and dissolution. What is cosmic activity? Consists of control over the differences of the essential natures, existence, and activity of all sentient and non-sentient things. In other words, we didn't read that verse. Eleonora reminded us that someone has to oversee karma. The yogi may be omniscient, but not on that level. You've got every single deed that every single being in the universe has done has to come back to that being, but in conjunction with every other being, my friends. Think of that. Whatever happens to you has to completely coordinate with the bird in the tree outside, with the ant in your floorboard. All that karma has to be synchronized precisely. Inconceivable. Therefore, you need an inconceivably omniscient being. And that far surpasses. What does Patanjali say about Ishvara? Ooh, let's have a little look. Oh, no, can't do that. Okay. What does Patanjali say about Ishvara? Let's tie all this together. It's good for you to tie all this together, my friends. What happened to my... Oh, I must have... No, I didn't. Yoga Sutras. Let's go back to Patanjali, our old friend. Terra firma. My friends, we ventured into the strange alien, Vedanta Sutra. Let's get back to terra firma. Look, in him the seed of omniscience is unsurpassed. 125. Remember, you would never be reading this in isolation like we do in the West. Anyone reading Yoga Sutras in India would know all about what we just read in Vedanta. Now you have a better idea. Why does he say the seed of omniscience is unsurpassed? Doesn't omniscience mean omni? No. It means omni within a universe. But it doesn't mean you can supervise karma. It doesn't mean you can create infinite universes and know them all. So therefore, you can be omniscient in a relative sense within a universe, but you can't affect karma. You've never, yogis can't affect other people's karmas. There may be the odd story, here and there, but they can't affect cosmic karma and cosmic creation. Now think about this differently, my friends. 125 Yoga Sutra. Tatra inishvara nirati shayam sarvagnya bijam. The seed of sarvagnya, the seed of omniscience, is nirati shayam, unsurpassed. Unsurpassed by who? The siddhas. The liberated souls who are just regular Atmans. They can know everything in the universe. So you could say they're omniscient. Not the omniscience of Ishvara, however, who not only knows infinite universes, but also within each universe oversees karma of every being. You never hear about a siddha doing anything like that, my friends. Right? So the released selves possess all the powers of the Lord with the exception of cosmic activity. Cosmic activity consists of control over what does it mean to be Ishvara? Right? Create, fine. We knew that right from the second sutra, but it also means, and Nyaya is going to, when we do Nyaya Sutras, I don't know what just happened. When we do Nyaya Sutra, this will be this is how they define Ishvara. The being, there needs to be a being to make sure. Here's an argument from Nyaya, my friends. If every action generates a reaction, I'm acting all the time, reactions all the time, but a trillion other entities are acting at the same moment I am. All those reactions have to all orchestrate together and coordinate. Who's organizing that? You can't just say karma itself is, because karma is just a law. It's not intelligent. It doesn't have the intelligence to sort of make sure that my karma doesn't inappropriately bump into yours. There needs to be an intelligent being. That's Nyaya's argument for God. They use creator argument as well, the intelligent design argument. Everybody does that. Muslims, Christians, and Jews on the Hebraic tradition. So Nyaya will as well, but they're also going to say you need to have an omniscient being to oversee karma, because karma is just a law. It's like gravity. Gravity doesn't know what it's doing. It just has forces, and it just, and bodies are affected by it. It's not, gravity is not intelligent that it's coordinating certain things to bump into other things. It just is an inanimate law. So therefore, karma can't be inanimate to be able to supervise and make sure that the karma doesn't conflict with somebody else's karma. But that's anyway, we'll see that if we do Nyaya, which I think we will. So cosmic activity consists of control over the difference of the essential natures, existence, and activity of all sentient and non-sentient beings. And non-sentient beings, right? Creation itself. And by the way, creation serves no other purpose than to bear fruit for the karma of living entities. If there's a rock in you go down, you dig your garden and you dig up a rock, and that rock has been there since Big Bang. There's no other reason that that rock is there other than at some point, maybe after 8 billion years, you're going to stub your toe on it or whatever you're going to do with it. Everything everything is there. Everything is only because of karma. There's no random kind of materiality that's just randomly there for its own being. No, anything that's inanimate, animate, it's all karmically orchestrated, my friends, according to these traditions. So karma, and therefore karma is this incredibly complex, has an incredibly complex task to perform, to make sure all the right karma comes to the right person. And while in any one given moment, karma has to be delivering the fruits for trillion, billion, trillion other living entities. Or how can you do that without intelligence, says Nyaya? You're going to say that's just random? That's just ridiculous. From a Nyaya point of view, and we'll look at their arguments. Okay. So, free from such activities, the released self, whose veils of ignorance have been removed, experiences Brahman unconditionally, directly. So, you can have a direct experience. This is the glory and power of the released self. Right. But the text mentions the controlling power of Brahman over the entire cosmos. That's a whole different category of power, is the point. So this is the difference between the liberated soul and Ishvara. Okay? That the liberated soul can do anything it wants inside the universe, can assume bodies, can even manifest more than one body, can know everything, but that's nothing. That is a teeny speck of ability compared to the one who creates infinite universes and oversees the karma of every living entity. All right, my friends. Well, there's no return. Once you're liberated, no return. So that's a good thing. And we're almost finished. Well, here we are at the end here. So we did a lot of section 4, chapter 4. Let's just read about no return. That might make us feel happy. There is no return for these released selves because the scriptures say so. There is no return for the released selves because the scripture. Why is he repeating that? Oh, look at that. Anavritihi shabdat. Anavritihi shabdat. When something is repeated, it's very, very rare in sutra writing. Sutra writing is minimalistic. You never waste a single word. I've never seen a repetition like that in sutraic writing. So this is really, he's stressing this, that when you get liberated, let's read this verse. I mean, it's a lovely way to end our workshop. And let's do it. Look, he's repeated. If the power and glory of the released self depends upon the supreme person, says Ramanuja now, right? That we may be liberated, but all those powers are really bestowed upon us by God. Even the liberated being, all of that omniscience, all what go anywhere in the ultimately it's all bestowed by God. So if the power and glory of the released self depends upon the supreme person, he being independent, well, there is the possibility of the return of the self into samsara by his will. If everything depends on Bhagavan, well, Bhagavan could send us back into, it's like Christianity, right? God creates the souls and sticks them in the world of samsara. So why can't you get liberated? God could just send you back then. So that's the doubt. And the opponent says, oh God, if everything's dependent on God, right? And even my omniscience and my siddhi accomplishments and roaming around the universe, ultimately, that's all bestowed by God. Well, God could just, have a bad day. get up in the morning, wrong side of his, of his bed, and just like curse everybody. You get a bit of that in the Old Testament, don't you? So you get it in any religion. So he could just send me back. He just could send me back to samsara. To this doubt, that's a doubt then. The Sutrakara means the author, gives the solution thus. Right? Because you can't say, you don't want to say, no, God can't do that. This is one of the big problems Christian theologians engage with over the centuries. Can God make a rock that he can't lift? If you say, yes, he can make a rock that he can't lift, then you've limited him. If you say, no, he can't make a rock, he can lift anything, so he can't make a rock, then there's something that he can't do. So you have to say something like, yes, he can make a rock that he can't lift, and then he can lift it. You'd have to sort of play around like that. But this is what philosophers of religion, they just chitta-vritti on this kind of thing forever. So how are you going to get out of this dilemma, right? Can God send you back? Well, if he can't send you back, then he's something he can't do. Then that means he's not omnipotent. Then he's not, he's limited in some way. So let's see what Ramanuja does. He says, to this doubt, the Sutrakara, got to have a solution for this. He gives the solution thus. The scriptures declare that there is a supreme person who is antagonistic to all evil and is the origination of all auspiciousness, who is the cause of origination of the world, the creator, who is entirely different from all other things. This is not Shankara, this is Vishishta Dvaita. God is different, my friends. How on earth can we imagine we are God and be trapped in ignorance? Think it through, think it through, think it through. How can God be trapped in ignorance? We cannot be God from a Vaishnava point of view. It's almost insane to think that. It's certainly absurd to think that for Ramanuja, because we're in ignorance. You can't just say, oh, ignorance is unreal. Then what does that mean? It's unreal. Then why is it? What's this unreality then? So for Ramanuja, now he wants to finish up. Last verse, he's going to be very clear, right? He's had to play the game. He's had to play the game of the Vedantic. He's been very faithful to the verse. He hasn't added his real bhakti here. He's been very constrained. He hasn't spoken about Narayana with 4 arms and Vaikuntha and the eternal abode. But now he's gonna leave us with his. Finally, now he gets a chance to say a little something, still following the Dharma of the verse. 22 is the last verse, and we will read it. So again, I'm going to read it again. The scriptures declare that there is a supreme person, not us, the Atman, who is antagonistic to all evil and the origination of all auspiciousness, semicolon, who is the cause of origination of the world, semicolon, who is entirely different from all things, different. This is not a Dvaita. This is Vishishta Dvaita. Difference in the oneness. Everything is God, but difference. Who is entirely different from all other beings. Who is omniscient, but not like the yogis, omniscient of karma of all beings and omniscient of infinite creations. Who by his true will accomplishes everything. Who is the ocean of mercy, my friends, for all those who take refuge in him. This is our bhakti. This is what we cling on to, my friends, the bhaktas. Krishna's grace, not up at stupid jnana. We're a ridiculous jnana. We think we're big shot Vedantas just because we know a little Sanskrit, we read a little Vedanta. Pathetic. Bhakti, we take shelter of Bhagavan. It's so obvious. You wonder what. Anyway, here it is. Who is the ocean of mercy for all those who take refuge in him, who has none equal or superior to him, and whose name is Supreme Brahman. Notice he's not saying Narayana. He's sticking with, why? Because the sutras never mention Narayana. So he says, okay, let's call him Brahman then. Just like Krishna in the Gita says, Aham Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I'm the source of Brahman. I'm the foundation of Brahman. Brahman is just the name given for, let's go to the first sutra. let's wrap this up. Give me a minute. Let's go into the first sutra. How did it all start, my friends? Ramanuja 1. Okay, ding, ding, ding. Remember the first sutra? Can you see? Can you see? Yay or nay?
Yes.
All right, let's just go back to the beginning. Notice, by the way, what page are we on? 111, page 81. What's the other 80 pages? Who remembers?
Purva-paksha.
Rebuttal of Advaita Vedanta. 80 pages before he discusses the verse. That's how offended Ramanuja and the Vaishnavas are to Advaita Vedanta saying, your beloved Bhagavan is Maya, doesn't exist. There's only impersonal, all-pervading Brahman. Your Bhakti and Bhaktas and Bhagavan, it's good for when you're in Maya. It's good, it purifies you, nothing wrong. It's a path, it's yoga. But once you become enlightened, everything dissolves. There's no more you, no more nothing. There's only infinite, eternal bliss. You've just totally erased Bhagavan, the reality. That's an offense to a Vaishnava. So, all right, then 80 pages Ramanuja goes, he's a formidable philosopher. 80 pages showing how utterly incoherent it is to suggest that the world never was there. Then why the hell does it appear to be there? What is Maya? What is this appearance? Where is it grounded? Where does it come from? Whose Maya is it? This is going to be this, and so many other arguments take up 80 pages. But anyway, we're looking at now. Right. So, inquiry, first verse, Atato Brahma Jignasu. And what is, okay, now we inquire into Brahman, just like Patanjali, now we're going to do yoga. And then the second verse, Patanjali, what is yoga? Chitta Vritti Nirodha. What is yoga here? Brahman is that omniscient, omnipotent, all merciful being. None of that's in the verse, but this is in the verse. From whom proceed the origin, meaning creation, maintenance and dissolution of this world. That's the definition of Brahman. Actually, it only has 3 words. He's added a lot there. It's Janma Adi Asyaha. From Brahman comes the creation, etc., of the universe. That's the only information. And later on in Sutra 5, it will say, and it is intelligent. Let's just read that. I don't want you to take my word for it. And then we go back and finish up and we're done. Right? And so therefore, number 1, Brahman is the creation, but it could still be dead. It could still be you could say atoms and gravity and nuclear forces, and the forces create the universe. It doesn't mean it. So therefore, when you get to number 5, on account of thinking, it thinks, right? The first cause is intelligent. You've got to, it's all very well saying Brahman is the source of creation. That's fine. But then you have to then say, if you want it to be God, it has to be a thinking source. Otherwise, the materialists will say, yeah, we accept that there's a source of creation. It's just like a big bang of matter. Or Sankhya, atheistic Sankhya. We had some of that. So therefore, that's all you're going to get from Vedanta. That Brahman, there is a Brahman, it is the source of creation, and it is intelligent. So Ramanuja he's respected that. He's not added all of his, Vishnu and his beauty and his relationships with his devotees and bhakti. He's been very restrained. He'll do that in other texts. He'll do that in the Gita, much more. Read Ramanuja's Gita, you'll get much more of that. And I don't know what happened to, oh dear. What did I do with, we want to finish it, my friends. Here. No, wait, I have to go down here. And then I have to click on you. And then I have to screen share. Let's finish up and we have kirtan, okay? Oh, we're in Ramanuja Bhasha. We want to be in 4. Okay. Do you mind if I just say that again? Because I'm a Bhakti too, and for me this is really dry. So give me the last minute to absorb my mind in my beloved Bhagavan as Ramanuja presents it. The scriptures declare that there is a supreme person who is antagonistic to all evil and is the origination of all auspiciousness, who is the cause of the origination of the world. And we just read the verse, Janma Adiyasyaha. That's why we went back. Who is entirely different from all things, who is omniscient. And Patanjali, remember, his omniscience is unsurpassed. Who by his true will accomplishes everything. What does it mean to be omnipotent? Who is the ocean of mercy for all those who take refuge in him. My friends, you're all invited to try Bhakti Yoga. Give it a chance. Just open your heart and just accept the obvious staring you in the face truth, reality that you cannot be God because you are trapped by forces beyond your control. That's a very no God that by definition has to be omnipotent. Why isn't that obvious? So, and just saying it's all unreal is going to get you nowhere. It's going to, and no philosopher is going to take that seriously. Omniscient, who by his true will accomplishes everything, who is the ocean of, and if you know, and the philosophers will debate that. Nyaya, Ramanuja, right? Who has none equal or superior to him, and whose name is the Supreme Brahman. It's true. Vishnu has an infinite names. One is Brahman. Similarly, we know from the scriptures alone that the Supreme Person, okay, pay attention. This is our final, this is Ramanuja's giving you this final message, my friends. He did all that hard work, being faithful. Okay, I'm a Vedantin, all right. Well, they're on this, well, Chaitanya says that, all right. That's not where his heart is at. He's now giving you his final message. So take it or leave it, but here it is. This is his parting words. Now, we know from the scriptures alone that the Supreme Person, pleased with the constant and continuous meditative worship of his devotees, this is bhakti, constant and continuous meditation through japa, through kirtan, through puja, through reading, through offering all your acts in the day, sitting on the john, going to the toilet, offer your body, you're purifying your body, everything. Pleased with that, destroys their ignorance. Krishna says, Ahamagyana jantamaha nasayami. I destroy your maya. I destroy your illusion. It's not just your hard work, your hard jnana. It's a grace of Bhagavan in bhakti. He bestows the supreme and unsurpassed bliss. What does it consist of? Not svarupa, not sva, but it consists of experiencing him in his own true nature, my friends, not us in our true nature. That is a goal, that is available, that is Patanjali's offering. But bhakti is about not just our svarupa, but Bhagavan's nature. It's dualistic. You still pick up your svarupa on the way. But bhakti is about you don't stop, you don't get off the train there. You realize there's got to be something greater than me. I didn't create this universe. So, what is the bliss? One more time. What is the supreme bliss? Our own Atman is bliss, but not supreme. Why is he saying supreme and unsurpassed? Because the bliss in our Atman is surpassed by the bliss of Bhagavan. The bliss of our Atman is not supreme because we're not supreme. So what is supreme and unsurpassed bliss? That is the nature of Bhagavan. So he bestows the supreme and unsurpassed bliss, which consists of experiencing him, not the Svarupa, him in his own true nature. And he does not cause them to return to samsara. Remember, the text opens by saying, how do we know God won't send us back? Because he's benevolent and loving and gracious. The scripture definitely declares, now he's got to back this up, he indeed lives thus throughout his length of life, reaches the world of Brahman, and does not return again. That's Chandogya. And now he's going to quote the Gita, because the Gita is much better for Ramanuja's agenda. It's much more bhakti focused. So now he calls what's called the Smriti. And the Lord himself declares, having attained me, those great souls are never again subject to rebirth, to this abode of sorrow and transience, for they have found the highest perfection. All the worlds and even the realm of Brahman are subject Oh, they're all subject to return, O Arjuna, all the celestial realms where the ritualist wants to go. Look, all the worlds, and even the realm of Brahma, not Brahman, but Brahma, the four-headed celestial, they're subject to return, O Arjuna, but reaching me, there's no rebirth. Right, last paragraph, my friends, and then I think hopefully Cece's there. As the released self has cut off the bondage of karma, has his knowledge uncontracted, meaning nothing's contracting it, nothing's limiting it, it can pervade anything, and has his nature rooted in the experience of Brahman. Remember, that means Narayana, that means the God, Ishvara. Remember, we just said one of his names is Brahman, and it is. He cannot possibly desire anything else. God is, you have an experience of God. Everything else is trivial, including all this business about wandering around the universe. I'm puzzled by that. That's even there. I'm sure Ramanuja's not thrilled with it, but it's in the Vedanta Sutra. He cannot possibly desire anything else, or cannot take any work on that account. No more desires for anything else. If you had a desire for anything else, it would mean God was not fully satisfying, which would mean a limited God then. If God is one of infinitely satisfying, there wouldn't even be the possibility of a samskara. This is why the Vaishnavas could never accept the Garden of Eden story. How could Earth is Adam going to go off and eat the apple? If God is so infinitely wondrous, it wouldn't even, the thought couldn't even arise in his mind. That's why Vaishnavas say you can never fall from the kingdom of God. They wouldn't accept that story. Even if it's a metaphor, they would say it makes no sense. That's it, because it's a comment on God. That God somehow wasn't fully adequate, so Adam had to sneak off and try something else. Let's have a little bite of the apple. Even if it's a metaphor, the point is you could never ever fall from the kingdom of God because God is so entirely, infinitely rapturous, if that's a word, or enrapturous, that there could be no possibility of the thought. Just there wouldn't be a seed that would manifest into a thought. A thought comes from a samskara. The samskara couldn't enter into your mind, even your spiritual mind, to think, oh, let's have a look around, see if we can find an apple to eat. I don't think so. All right, almost finished, my friends. As the released self has cut off the bondage of karma, and his knowledge uncontracted, remember what uncontracted means, nothing's limiting it, no subtle body, no gross body. And as his nature rooted in the experience of Brahman, his consciousness is immersed in Brahman, but not in union, as two inseparable but distinct entities. Clear, we've established that. But rooted there. Like a tree is rooted in the ground. It isn't the ground, it's different from the ground, but it's inseparable from the ground. But two different things. And the Supreme Person will never cause the devotee to return into samsara. The Lord himself has said, I'm very dear to the man of knowledge and he's dear to me. Certainly all those are great. This is Gita. But I deem the man of knowledge to be my very self. The man of knowledge here meaning not knowledge of the Atman, but knowledge of God. There's two kinds of jnana. There's the jnana of your Atman, the jnana yoga, but there's the knowledge of God. That's bhakti. But you both know something. One knows the self and one knows God. Here he's talking about the verse in the Gita in the 7th chapter. Is those who know me. It's framed that way. At the end, and here let's finish with this, my friends. Ramanuja's his parting words. At the end of many births, it may take many births. Don't give up, my friends. What else? What are you going to do? Let's finish. The man of knowledge finds refuge in me. Many births were running around thinking, oh, maybe this will give me happiness. Maybe that will. Maybe if I go here. Maybe if I buy that. Maybe if I make some money. Maybe. Fail, 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 fail. After many births like that, the man of knowledge finds refuge in me, realizing Vasudeva Krishna is all and nothing else. Everything else is illusion. Disappointment, my friends. It's not pessimistic. It's trying to lead us to the highest bliss available, which eclipses the bliss of our Svarupa. Patanjali, have you noticed Patanjali doesn't even use the word Ananda. He doesn't even talk about bliss. No, nowhere in the Yoga Sutras is there any mention of Ananda. There's Sat, there's Chit. There's no bliss in your Svarupa. It's freedom from suffering. Right, final. The repetition of the entire, let's go back. Look. It was repeated. Look at the verse. There is no return for the released selves because the scriptures say so. There is no return for the released selves because the scriptures say so. That's unusual. It's a flaw. So Ramanuja is going to explain it. Why did he repeat it? The last verse. The repetition of the entire sutra is to show, is to show that the Shastra is finished. Thus, everything stands relevant, consistent, and explained. I wonder if Shankara says anything about why there's a repetition. I was about to say that it's repeated to stress the importance, because normally repetition is stress, but Ramanuja explains it differently, and that's fine. I'll fully honor. Yeah, Shankara says the same thing as Ramanuja. Okay, I take it back. All right, my friends. Let's stay together for this life and encourage ourselves on our paths of yoga. Or let's keep reading these texts. I think I'm almost done with all of these basically preparatory texts. And we'll do the Nyaya Sutra just so that you know, so that you have a broader idea of what these 6 schools are. And then I'm thinking of doing a regular Bhagavatam. And then I don't have to act normal anymore. I'm 65, I'm tenured, I'm the oldest in the department. I think I'm going to go out with a bang, just like an eccentric. I'm going to show up with just like, I'm going to take Baba. I take vows at some point, just show up in robes, in a loincloth. You can do nothing. All right, my friends. Questions? And Cici, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Cici.
My camera is different from my microphone, so.
Okay, Cici, I wanted you to put your website. Can you put it in the chat?
Yes, there.
Yeah,
and you're
I
not.
did.
Okay, I mean, I'm strictly using this for Svadhyaya. I'm not doing anything else, but I have to make an exception for Cici because I saw what she was doing, and she's just doing this amazing. I went with her. I told you, into the jail, and I just touched my heart. And to this day, I think of those prisoners, I just want to go and be with them and study text with them. And so I plan to do that. But Cici's really doing some amazing stuff, and with kids. And I'm going to bring a bunch of children's book back from India, and maybe I'll send them to you. Do you get, Cici? Do you get? You're not allowed mail from America, are you?
Yes, I think so.
I thought you weren't allowed packages. There's some weird thing about. I think there's some weird thing about postage. But anyway, so Cici's doing great work. If you're interested, check out her website. I mean, she needs. If you want to support any of her, when we were there, we bought a bunch of Bhakti yoga books for the prisoners, and she just got them all. So if you want to sponsor anything like that, check out her website. And I personally have been with her in the jails, in the little orphanage. Both of them touched my heart. So if you find that's something you find noble, or you want to help, then the website's in the chat. We'll take questions. Is that all right, Cici? You have a few minutes?
Very much. Yes, of course.
Okay, John. You have to unmute, John.
We cannot hear you.
Do I need to unmute everybody?
No.
No.
Do I unmute everybody?
No.
Oh, Edwin, no.
No, remember what happened last time?
No, it's his problem.
Okay. John, see if you can work it out and get back to us. Shiva.
Yes, thank you, Edwin, for offering these courses. I just want to tell you how great they are, and we're always learning more. It's never the same when we read these sutras. So my question somewhat relates a bit to the Vedanta Sutras, but it's a little bit tangential, and it's something that's been on my mind lately, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts and perhaps others in the room. Do you suppose it's possible for the karma to be such that one reincarnates into an AI? Can an AI ever be conscious? What really constitutes the vehicle of the Atman? And considering that our physical bodies are just a complex configuration of specialized cells, why not a neural network? What constitutes a body or vehicle to be fit for reincarnation? Thank you.
Well, obviously we have to engage in constructive metaphysics here, because clearly that's not a question that we would find any scriptural resources for. But the subtle body has to go with the Atman. So it's not just the Atman, the entire Sukshma Sharira and the entire the entire subtle body would, in principle, could a subtle and its next body is determined by karma. So there's two different things here. So I'd be hard pressed to think what kind of karma would cause the subtle body of an Atman to enter into an AI body. I'd be hard pressed to think of how that would take place. However, we just read a verse in the Vedanta Sutra which said that the qualified Siddha by will could enter into multiple bodies. So it's much easier for me to envision. I have no idea why Siddha would ever want to do this, but let's say if Siddha was willing to submit him or herself to an experiment, I wouldn't have a problem with a qualified Siddha entering an AI body with his or her subtle body and animating the AI body. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if the question is inadvertently, by the inadvertent laws of karma, could an Atman take birth as it's hard for me to envision how that would take place. I'm not saying no, I just don't see what the mechanisms would be.
That's a really good distinction, and I'll meditate and reflect on that one. It's also a matter of, I was thinking about that too. I kind of simplified the question, but I knew it was more than the Atman, that there's the karmasya and the subtle body, and how that might juxtaposition with like a complex organization of cellular structure versus, say, something artificial. It's something I would like to look into more. It interests me, but thank you. I appreciate your thoughts.
I mean, I just don't see how the law of karma would. I don't see it as logically impossible. I forget about the Siddha, so we agree on that. The Siddha I feel could do it, but it's not logically impossible that the Kali Yuga degenerates to such a point where, the bodies get more and more Kali Yuga-esque. And, I mean, let's do a mind game. You could have you can have metallic limbs, and you could pretty much replace most of the parts of the body. So let's say science gets to the point where you replace every single part of the body, but it could be the case the subtle body could still be karmically there, but that's not quite what you're saying. But let's just put that out there. So that's the third thing, right? The Siddha could do it voluntarily. That science could get to the point where it's replacing all the limbs, but whether somebody would actually, the karma itself from one womb, a person dies and be injected into an A, that's much harder for me to sort of come up with a plausible. I can't say it's impossible, but I just can't think of a way of how that might happen. But we can keep thinking about it. Yeah, thank you, Shiva. John, are you back?
Thank you.
Yeah, are you back on stage?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. The mic was off. I had to reset it. Question about that last sutra, Professor. Ramanuja saying that, quoting the Gita, saying that on many lives you'll come back
Yeah.
and ultimately you'll find, I guess, love.
You've frozen, John. You still have a problem.
And devotion. The actual sutra is saying that from that you may not return. How do you reconcile those two? Can you hear me?
We missed half of your question.
Is the audio better now? Maybe it's from the laptop itself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So if Ramanuja is saying that she's quoting the Gita and saying that upon many lives, upon many births, you'll find devotion ultimately. But in the sutra itself, we're saying, essentially saying that you can't return from it. How do you reconcile the two?
Well, no, the Gita is not saying that. He's saying it takes many, many births to attain that state. And then you never.
Oh, to attain that state.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
In other words, right. So one verse says, having attained me, these great souls are never again subject. That's one verse. But then the other verse says, which is down the bottom here, which is, we can look at the Gita itself if you want. I can pull it up. At the end of many births, the man of knowledge finds refuge in me. I mean, it takes many births to fully surrender to Bhagavan. We may be, like my guru would always say, 50-50, or, we have, so it takes many births to fully let go of our ego, of our own thinking that we're the doers. It takes many births to be purified, to 100% take refuge. So if we read that, at the end of many births, the man of knowledge finds refuge in me, realizing that Vasudeva is all. We might think God is, we might say theoretically God is all, but we don't act that way. We still cling to our egos. We don't take full dependence on Vasudeva. It takes many births to get to that full surrender. And therefore, it is very hard to find such a great soul person.
So the sutra isn't saying that once you do reach the Swarupa Asthanam, that can you return and then follow the path of devotion?
That's a different kind of question. It's not addressing that. In other words, the question is, let's say you don't do bhakti and you attain the Rupa Vastanam. This is why the Bhagavatam says it's hell. Because how are you going to find bhakti if you're Sarupa Vastanam? You have no mind to think about it. And therefore the Bhagavatam will say, it will even say this, one verse, actually, even if you attain Svarupa Vastanam, you fall. And eventually it says you come back. And I used to think, well, that's very sectarian, because that's not what the other traditions are saying. They're all saying you attain it and that's eternal. And then I realized, you know what? That's an act of grace. Because if you didn't return, you would never, ever have a chance. What is the Christian hell? You're in hell for, the old medieval Christian hell, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You never, ever, 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 one life you messed up, whatever you did, but you never have a chance to return to God. So for the Bhagavatam, even though your Sarupa Vasanam is blissful, you're not like burning in hell's fire, but if it deprives you eternally of the possibility of having a blissful relationship with Bhagavan, then it's like hell, it says. So there's one verse says, actually, they return. And I used to think that's sectarian. That's not what everybody else is saying. And now I think, thank God, so that at least, you return it probably as an incredibly enlightened being, right? You're probably going to be, but at least you have a chance to then encounter Bhagavan again. So, but that's just the Bhagavatam. Let me be clear. The Bhagavatam says that you return, but generally speaking, you never return from the enlightened state.
So why wouldn't someone in Svarupa Vastanam who's reached an enlightened moksha state, much like we see at Sukadeva in the Bhagavatam, that why wouldn't they, upon hearing the stories of Krishna or whoever their Ishtadeva is, why wouldn't that allow them to sort of move on towards bhakti? What I guess what I'm trying to say is what prevents them or gets them stuck in Svarupa Vastanam?
Well, as long as they have a body, they have that chance. But if Shuka died and he hadn't heard, or if an enlightened, then you don't have a body and mind anymore. How are you going to encounter the stories of Bhagavan? If you attain, Sarupe Vastanam in one life, you finish up the rest of that life, fine. You might encounter the stories the rest of that life, and like Shuka, become attracted to that, and then sort of you turn your back on Sarupe Vastanam because now you want Bhagavan. But let's say that didn't happen to you and you die. So now you don't have a body and mind, you're in a Sarupe Vastanam situation. So that's why the Bhagavatam, that's why it's hell. From a certain point of view, because hell means being, if we define hell as being separate from God, which Christians would, by the way, they might. So if we define hell as being separated from this wondrous being, everything else is hellish compared to that, even if it's a state of Satchidananda, then that's very misfortunate. And so I like the idea, although it's dissonant from all the other texts. But maybe if you did fall down from Sarupe Vastanam, that would at least give you a chance to encounter Bhagavan. And if you fell down from, I'm guessing now, this is me speaking, that if you were a siddha and you fell and you came back down to samsara, you'd be a very, very, very elevated being with amazing karma. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Another wonderful Swadhyaya. Appreciate it.
Best I could do. You're welcome. Andrea.
Thank you. Sorry, the camera's flickering. I have just a question about the use of the term Vedanta. I spend a lot of time at Ananda Ashram, where they call themselves Yoga Vedanta. I guess there's a reverence for text, and that's why it's Vedanta. Why the Vedanta Society, like I listen to a lot of the talks there. It's not all this stuff, but there's a reverence for scripture. So that's, and also related, like, so Shankaracharya, when he's writing his own texts, has he taken off his Vedanta hat?
No, he's not constrained to interpret the verse. He can just come right out and express his Advaita in his own words. He's not restricted or constrained by the text. So yeah, Vedanta is used very, very freely. Most traditions see themselves as sort of connected to Vedanta, like the Bhagavata Purana. Clearly, it's got Vishnu and Krishna and all the stories, none of which you find in the Upanishads. But the very, very first verse, let me get it. It's making it clear that it's let me just get the text. So the first verse of the Bhagavatam is, so what the later traditions do is they see themselves as taking the seed, just like Om becomes Om Namo Shivaya for the Shaivais, right? They're taking the seed and they're manifesting its full form, or Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. They take the Om and they, which is, Brahman, Ishvara in its barest minimum presence, and they're manifesting its full glory in Krishna or Shiva, etc. So the Puranas see themselves as elaborating on and expanding the from the Upanishads. So the verse is, I don't have the Sanskrit. So, but basically it's mirroring the first verses of the Vedanta, and by doing that, it's connecting itself. Yeah. So your question is, yeah. So, but then, having said that, the term Vedanta is used very loosely, just like the term yoga is. So hardcore Vedanta, like the lineages, the actual Vedanta lineages in India, with that, the Advaitins are in Sringeri Mutt in South India, and the Ramanujas are in various places like Melkote and Srirangam, and Madhva has his headquarters in Udupi. If you go to the real Vedantins that are real Vedantins, they're all studying the Vedanta Sutra and the Gita as well, and the Upanishads, and they're studying it very, very seriously, every single word, and they're studying all the commentaries. So that's real, just like real yoga is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. But on the high street, it's, touching your toes and, and doing postures. So just as yoga has been completely and utterly commodified in the West, although there are some yoga, there are folks who are more serious and more connected to the tradition than others. So real heavy duty, real Vedanta is definitely what we've been reading, the study of these texts. But then you get, but then some of the sort of neo-Vedantins are more textually situated than others. So some of them, if they don't read, reading the Gita is actually Vedanta, because the Vedanta tradition has 3 texts, the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutra, and the Gita. So even if you don't read the Upanishads and the Vedantas, Vedanta Sutra is very hard. It's not very joyful. It's a real cerebral kind of activity. The Upanishads are wonderful. And the Gita is, Gita can, immediately and direct, guide your spiritual practice right from the 2nd chapter. So if you study Gita, in that sense, you're kind of connecting to the larger Vedanta tradition. And but Vedanta Sutra itself is something very, very few are going to, really study the entire. We've read, even what we've been reading is an abridged version of Ramanuja and Shankara. So, so the word gets, commodified as well, and it gets really watered down. But there are some that are more grounded than others. I would say the Shivanandas are a bit more grounded. The Shivananda folks are a little bit more grounded. They do study, some of their senior swamis will study the Vedanta Sutra, and they read the Upanishads. They read it. So I would say that, and they're Advaitin, so they follow the Advaita line. So there are some transplanted forms that are a kind of more, shall we say, traditionally faithful than others, but otherwise the term just gets used very, very, very liberally.
When you speak about it, like nobody's going to call themselves neo-Vedanta because that's such a pejorative, correct?
I think yes.
And when you speak about it, it's like I don't know, just is there like a meaning of it? Like there is a vernacular meaning for yoga. We know what somebody says when they say, I'm going to go do yoga.
Yeah.
And but I hear like the criticism of it, but I wonder if is there some thing that the vernacular actually is referring to?
Well, the term neo-Vedanta is an academic term that is used for, and probably starts with Vivekananda, where there's where their Advaita elements are mixed in with Shaktaism and yoga, and mixed in with all kinds of things, and eventually takes a very different form from the Vedanta of, let's say Neo-Vedanta is a term mostly for Neo-Advaita Vedanta, not the other schools. So that takes and so that tends to be, it takes a very different form from the traditional text that the traditional Advaita lineage is are studying. So that's an academic term. I don't know if it's pejorative. You have Neoplatonism, and that's not something that's necessarily disparaging. It's just bits of Plato mixed in with other philosophies, and it's not Plato wouldn't recognize it, but there are some elements in it. So I would think of Neo-Vedanta that way. It's not, it's an academic term, which academics are not going to use pejorative terms. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh. Any other questions? So we have, okay, Cece. Welcome again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't think I need to introduce Cece, right? We've introduced her several times.
Yes.
Is your daughter going to join us, Cece?
No, not today. She
Too late,
said,
isn't it?
say hi to Edwin, but she's at a friend's house.
Okay.
So, teenagers.
Of course.
So I'll make a quick test to see if you can hear me correctly.
Yes, and could everybody, would you all mute yourselves? Because last time I muted you all and I stupidly didn't realize I was muting Cece. So if we could all mute ourselves, that would be great.
Do you hear the harmonium correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Hanuman 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 Jaya Sitaram Jai Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Hanuman 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 Hare Rama 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 Sita Rama 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 Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Hanuman Jaya Sitaram Jai Jai Jaya Sitaram, Jai Jai Hanuman. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
CC, thank you so much. What a perfect way of ending a rather cerebral study of the Vedanta Sutra. You take us back to what is ultimately the goal, which is the divine names, and Ishvara manifested the divine names. Thank you so much. You sing so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you for remembering our Bhakti to us. Thank you.
Yes, well, you remind me. So we'll see you all again, and CC hopefully as well. If we do the Nyaya Sutras, I've had a little bit of interest through email, so hopefully we'll see how we all feel. But if you're interested, you can, feel free to drop me an email. Thank you all for sharing these texts with us. It gives us all an opportunity to, figure out what our paths are. That's basically what we're doing. Which path resonates with our samskaras, but hopefully not, that having decided that, we go deep on our paths. So that's the ultimate goal. So good night, everybody. Thank you, Cece. And did you put your website on the chat, Cece? I didn't see it.
Jnana put
You
it.
did.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jnana very much.
Great. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be in touch, Cece. Good night.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.